We're going to go ahead and get started, folks. I will now call to order the meeting of the Omaha Planning Board. The Planning Board members that are here today are Trenton Magid, David Rosacker, Jeffrey Moore, Michael Pate, Patrick Morse. Christine Carnes, our Vice Chair, is absent today, and I am Greg Rosenbaum, Chairman. Members of the city staff that are in attendance today are Dave Fanslau, Planning Director, Sherry Rockwell, Assistant Planning Director, Eric England, Acting Planning Manager, Mike Carter, Planning Board Administrator, Alan Thielen from the City Law, and Debbie is back. Debbie Hightower is back. Ricky Flott was our secretary. Debbie was our secretary about 3 or 4 years ago, and she's back. Welcome back, Debbie. Our rules of procedure are as follows. Notice of this hearing has been published. This board met this morning, reviewed all the cases, and visually inspected sites. Copies of today's agenda are located on the table in front of us. You are welcome to come down and pick one up, and they should be right here. The cases on the consent agenda will be heard first. Consent cases are perceived by the Planning Board to be non-controversial, have already been heard, or been recommended for layover, and therefore will be read and voted on without the opportunity for your testimony. If you wish to testify, you may remove the case from the consent agenda. When each consent case is read, I will ask if anyone wants the case removed. If you do, please stand up and say so, and the case will be removed. This case will then be heard in the order in which it appears on the regular agenda after we go through the consent cases. When the case is heard, you will have the opportunity to come to the podium, state your name and address, and give your testimony at that time. When hearing cases on the regular agenda, the board will first hear from the applicant, and after the applicant states their case, we will hear from the proponents, and then we will hear from the opponents. After both sides are heard, the public hearing will be closed and no additional testimony will be permitted unless a board member requests additional information. When at the podium, please state your name, address, and whom you are representing for the record. Your testimony is very important to us. In the interest of time and courtesy to others, please be short and to the point. We will try to limit each case to 10 minutes. Those directly involved in the case, please speak first. We request that large groups select a spokesperson to represent that group, therefore eliminating repetitive testimony. When giving testimony, please provide new information and try not to repeat what has previously been said. We do ask that all speakers and others be treated with courtesy and with respect. In that regard, please remain silent while seated, and please take the time now to turn off your cell phones. Our decision to approve, deny, or continue a case made here today will be forwarded to the City Council for another public hearing and final disposition by the City Council. Conditional use permits are an exception to this rule. The board's decision made here today on conditional use permits are final and not forwarded to the City Council. Lastly, upon the advice of the Law Department, all communications to the board members from attorneys or other interested parties should be transmitted through the Planning Department so they are made a part of the public record. The department will then transmit all that information to the board as well as to the rest of the public. Rezoning matters are an exception to this rule. There are no changes to the consent agenda, so I'm going to get started by reading the consent cases. Again, if you want a case to be removed from the consent agenda, you'll have to raise your hand or stand up and let me know, and then that case will be heard in its regular order. Agenda item number 1, case C10-17-215, C12-17-216. The applicant is CC Military LLC. It's on consent for layover. The request is a final plat approval of Copper Creek, lots 1 through 92, and outlots A through G, a subdivision outside the city limits with rezoning from AG to DR and R5. Portions of the property are located within a flood fringe overlay district. The location is southeast of 168th and Military Road. Does anyone wish to have this removed from consent? Okay, seeing none. We'll move on to agenda item number 8, case C10-18-59, C12-18-60. The applicant is Earhart Griffin and Associates for Sage Capital. It's on consent for layover. Request preliminary plat approval of Preserve on Pacific Edition, a subdivision inside the city limits with rezoning from R1 to R5. The location is 9402 Pacific Street. This is on for layover. Does anyone wish to have this case removed from the consent agenda? Seeing none. Agenda item number 10, case C11-18-63, C10-18-64, C12-18-65. The applicant is Dahlman Rose, LLC. It's on consent for approval. Request is a preliminary and final plat approval of Dahlman Rose, a minor plat inside the city limits with a waiver of section 53-8-4A lot depth, along with rezoning from GC to R7 and approval of a planned unit redevelopment overlay district. The location is northeast of 7th and Cedar Streets. Does anyone wish to have this removed? Okay, it will be removed and heard in its regular order. Moving on, agenda item number 11, case C10-18-66, applicant Ryan Miller and VJ Malik. It's on for approval. Request rezoning from GC to NBD. Property is located within ACI-1 overlay district. Location 3924 and 3926 Harney Street. Anyone wish to have this removed? Seeing none. Agenda item number 12, case C10-18-68. Applicant is Zach Atchley. It is on consent for approval. Request rezoning from HI to NBD. Property is located within ACI 1 overlay district. The location 1217 Pacific Street. Anyone wish to have this removed? Seeing none. Agenda item number 13, case C7-18-69, C8-18-70. Applicant, New Singular Wireless. This is on consent for layover. Request approval of a major amendment to a conditional use permit to allow secondary educational facilities in a R3 district and approval of a special use permit to allow a broadcasting tower in a R3 district with a waiver of section 55-166, height to allow a 92-foot tall tower. Location 400 North Happy Hollow Boulevard. Does anyone wish to have this case removed from consent agenda? Okay, that will be removed. Finally, agenda item number 15, case C7-88-220, applicant Omaha Performing Arts Society. It is on consent for layover. The request is an approval of a major amendment to a conditional use permit to allow surface parking in a CBD. Property is located within an ACI 1 overlay district. Location 1512 Howard Street and 424 South 15th Street. Does anyone wish to have this case removed? You do, sir. Okay, that will be removed. Okay, we finished with the consent cases. Do we have a motion for those on for approval?
I'll make a motion for layover cases numbers 1 and 8.
You want to go layover first, or?
I'm sorry, I said layover.
Okay, that's all right. We'll go layover. We have a motion and a second. Debbie, will you record the vote?
Megan.
Yes.
Rosacker.
Yes.
Moore.
Yes.
Pate.
Yes.
Morris.
Yes.
Mr. Chair.
Yes. Okay, do we have a motion for those on for approval?
Motion for approval of cases number 11 and 12.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Debbie, will you please record the vote?
Rosacker.
Yes.
Moore.
Yes.
Pate.
Yes.
Morris.
Yes.
Megan.
Yes.
Mr. Chair.
Yes. Okay, those cases that were on consent, we just voted on them. They are done for the day. No further action will be taken. If you were here for one of those cases, you can stay and watch the proceedings, or you are free to leave. It's up to you, so. Okay, we'll get started with an administrative case only. It's agenda item number 2, administrative case. There is no public testimony. Agenda item number 2, case C10-17-243, C12-17-244. Applicant 18818 Fort LLC, care of Brad Brooks. The request is a final plat approval of Enclave Flats, a subdivision outside the city limits with rezoning from AG to DR and R4. Location 18818 Fort Street. No public testimony. We'll hear from the city.
Okay. This is the final plat of Enclave Flats. Planning Board recommended approval of the preliminary plat in November 2017. City Council subsequently approved in January 30th, 2018. The development has added 2 lots and now includes 107 single-family residential lots, 10 outlots for open space and drainage purposes, and an associated right-of-way. There are a couple items that will need to be addressed prior to forwarding to City Council. One of those being the extension of 186th Avenue to the west boundary of the subdivision, as well as the applicant providing a copy of the proposed covenants. Conditionally, the final plat is consistent with the approved preliminary plat and the ordinances of Chapter 53 of the Omaha Municipal Code. The department recommends approval of the rezoning from AG to DR and R4, and approval of the final plat subject to the conditions of preliminary plat approval and addressing the 3 items listed in your recommendation report prior to forwarding to City Council.
I move to approve the rezoning from AG to DR and R4, subject to the 3 conditions in the report.
Do we want to include the approval of the final plat?
And the approval of the final plat.
Okay, we have a motion.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Debbie, will you please record the vote?
Moore.
Yes.
Pate.
Yes.
Morris.
Yes.
Megan. Rosacker.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, we're going to move on to agenda item number 3. We're going to take 3 with agenda item number 14. I'll read both cases and then we'll hear from the applicant. Agenda item number 3 is case C11-18-38, C10-18-39, C12-18-40. Applicant All Holy Spirit Greek Orthodox Church. The request is preliminary plat approval of Everett Place, a subdivision outside the city limits with rezoning from AG to DR, R5 and R6, along with approval of a planned unit development overlay district. This was laid over from our March meeting. The location is northwest of 192nd Street and Gray Fawn Plaza. Also, we're taking agenda item number 14. It's case C8-18-71, C8-18-72, C7-18-74. Applicant, again, All Holy Spirit Greek Orthodox Church. The request, approval of a special use permit to allow assisted living in a R5 district, approval of a special use permit to allow daycare services in a R5 district, and approval of a conditional use permit to allow religious assembly in a R5 district with a waiver of section 55-206, height for a 55-foot tall church and steeple. Location northwest of 192nd and Gray Vaughn Plaza. May we hear from the applicant, please?
Afternoon, Jason Thielen, E&A Consulting Group, 10909 Mill Valley, Suite 100, here on behalf of the applicant. Kind of get our bearings here on this project. It's in between a couple major streets in Pacific and Dodge, Pacific being here in Dodge, 192nd Street being the arterial road that we are up against. Is this location here. If you're familiar with the Avenue 1 project, which is north of us, and which I'll continue to talk about, and then Pacific Renaissance, which is the 12-plex project that's been approved for quite some time on that location, and then the property in between, and we'll get into all of that as we go through here. Just a little bit of background on this project I think is important to at least get you guys up to speed, the amount of time and effort we put in with adjacent property owners as well as with staff and a couple groups looking at this. I've been working on this project since December of 16 to this present time. We had a client that came in and had put the Nicely property under contract back early in 16. We started talking with them, working with them. Around February of 17, the All Holy Greek Orthodox Church came in and was working on a letter of intent on the Everett piece and asked us to represent them as well. And considering that both pieces are pretty much adjacent to each other, it made a lot of sense for both of those groups to come together. And so from about February on, at that point, we started working together as a group, meeting, talking about the project, trying to make sure everybody's interests were represented. March 2nd of 17, we had our first pre-application meeting with the city and city staff and talked about the project. Went back with their input and started working together as a group. We then came back in April of 17 for our second meeting with staff, included the entire group. So the developers that had Nicely project under contract, the Dicleys themselves were there, the Greek Orthodox Church was there as well as our team, and we met with staff again based on those comments we talked about in March. Then went back to RDG and had a group meeting again to try to talk about how we could get this all to come together as one big project. There's a lot of moving parts. It's a lot going on at the same time. We continued to work through till about August of 17, and it became pretty apparent at that time that we were not going to be able to work together as groups. Things fell by the wayside. Developers came and went, and these things happen in projects like this. So it was at that time I think we decided to move forward with our project on its own so that we could keep moving forward. We have been working with, we've had discussions here with the Niceleys. Mr. Daly owns this property here. You'll notice it includes more than just this box here, and I'll get into more of that as it relates to some of the comments. And then we've also continued to work with Mr. Jude Beller, owns this piece of property here, who is sophisticated in the land development business, although I did see he had to bring his younger brother to talk on his behalf, so I don't know if he's bringing out the big guns for us today or not, but that's my understanding. And then the Baker property here, we have been in contact with them. It was since sold. We actually tried to purchase that property 3 times, I believe, and were told that it was not for sale. In addition to that, we have talked with Mr. Kurt Hofer, not only representative of Avenue 1, but also we have to bring sanitary sewer across his property, and so he's also in the loop from that standpoint. We had a neighborhood meeting February 21st of 18, and it was a good meeting. There wasn't a lot of neighbors there. As a matter of fact, there was a couple representatives from one representative from the Fire Ridge Homeowners Association, which is here. We continued to talk with him and working with that neighborhood as well. So as you can see, a lot of work over a year's worth of work, a lot of constituents, a lot of stakeholders we've been working with at the time to get us to this point where we are here today. So we'll get into a little bit of the details of this project. It's a 21-acre project located at the northwest corner of Gray, Plume, and 192nd Street. It is a 4-lot preliminary plat, and we're asking for a change of zone from agriculture to DR, R5, and then the R6 PUD, which I think you're all familiar with as we bring in the low-density type projects for apartments. There are use permits that go along with this project as well, and I'll talk about those through this as well. The R6 PUD, which is being laid over in the rec report, which we are fine with, is at this location here, but I thought I'd at least show you. Those will be 36 units of market rate apartments, 4 9-plexes. It's a 2-story product with garage underneath. That's at least what's being planned right now. That will be that R6 PUD, so we'll have to meet all of the R5 and R6 site regulators for that project. There's a daycare on this site as well that we have shown, which is at this location here, 10,000 square feet. And we do have interest from a couple of daycare providers in that 8 to 10,000 square foot range. And there's an idea of what this may look like and how that will go forward at that location. That is in the R5 district. This other component of the project is assisted living and memory care at this location here, kind of south of this private road. I don't have any colored pictures of that, but we have 54 assisted living, which is this product here at that location. That's kind of that south building, and then there's a memory care component, which is 24 units at that in that building. So memory care single story, the assisted living is a 2-story product. So again, fitting within the R5 zoning district. So memory care, assisted living at that location. And then we have the religious assembly use, which is a conditional use permit at this location here. 32,000 square feet of total building. They'll build it in a couple phases. They'll build 24,000 square feet to begin with, which will consist of the gathering area, and I believe this location here. So that gives you an idea of the floor plan, what that looked like. This will be a large kind of open space and entranceway into that. We know we are aware that we'll need to go forward and ask for a waiver to the height for the parapet and the cross, and we will be prepared to do that as well.
Can I ask you a real quick question on this? Is
Sure.
the church going to operate all of these facilities?
They will not.
They will not. So
No.
they're going to operate the religious assembly, obviously.
That
but-
is correct. Yep, they will occupy this location. They do have this property under contract, and
They
they're
do.
working with a couple daycare providers.
Okay, that's all. Thanks.
I'll leave that one there. So we'll talk about access just a little bit. We are kind of fixed on a couple points. The Avenue 1 project, if you're aware, has an approved preliminary plat. This is the location that their preliminary plat shows. I talked to Mr. Hover. They're not planning on moving that as of now, so we'll match up with whatever that location is. We'll probably be there before them, so I assume that's where that intersection will end up. And then we have the right-in, right-out, future right-in, right-out, which will be a full movement intersection at 192nd Street, which is the 8th mile location. This road will come down through the project and then stop, as we do not own past that. We're making a connection to Fire Ridge, which is Street B there. I know this is a concern of the neighborhood. When we met with them at the neighborhood meeting, from our standpoint, we are of the opinion that Farnham does create a better access through. People can file out onto the HWS Cleveland, use that collector to get locally. We understand why Public Works is requesting it. We are indifferent from that standpoint on that access. And then Gray Plume, which is this this access here. So this exhibit shows it's actually platted. It actually belongs to Mr. Daly. So whenever this was platted into acreages, he created these fingers, which then became the private drive access point. There is an access easement over that piece of property. It's not shown on our plat because technically we do not own it. However, we do have rights to improve that piece of land if it is to be improved for public purposes. And so we are working with Mr. Daly on that. We will have to pay fair market value for his property. It's not like we can take it. And so we're working through that with him to get that all finalized as we move forward. We have some wetlands on site. At this location here, we've done a wetland delineation. That's in an outlot. We're impacting less than our half an acre that's allowed by the Corps of Engineers. A couple things. We're under a conditional approval. And a couple conditions I want to met. I've talked with staff, but I want to get it on record at least. Underneath the plat, under comment number 1, the additional right-of-way dedication of 192nd Street as it relates to the potential of a 6-lane cross-section from Dodge Street to Pacific. You know, we're already dedicating our 17 feet per this plat. I think to ask us to consider dedicating more, I think is over and beyond the usual circumstance. In circumstances like that, we've usually been paid for the right-of-way at that point. I don't think we're unopposed to working with staff to determine what that future right-of-way might be and then placing that in an outlot for a future purchase. But we're not going to be in favor of just giving that property up. It does affect the overall sellability, square foot of property that can be sold, and we'll factor into the financial component of this property. I think it's an undue hardship considering we're already giving our 17 feet and on a corridor that's not slated as a larger right-of-way like 144th Street is for additional trail along 144th Street. So we wanted to make that point. Continue to work with Public Works on that. I talked about gray fawn. The conditional use permit for the church talks about providing a sidewalk down from what will be Street B coming through Fire Ridge down to the church there. As you can see, there's a tremendous amount of grade there. It's 3-to-1 slope to over 10 feet of fall through there. Getting a sidewalk there is going to be really, really expensive, first of all, but second of all, it's kind of impractical considering what you have to do to get it down there. When Harney Street will eventually come in and they can come around down Street A at a reasonable grade. And so we'd ask that to not be a condition of approval for that. We are in agreement with all the other conditions that staff has put out. We'll continue to work with staff on those. We're consistent with your comp plan and your future land use plan. And with that, I'd be more than happy to answer any questions you have. Thank you.
Okay, are there any other proponents?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Brent Beller, 11440 West Center Road, appearing on behalf of Jude and Alexis Beller. They are related. So the Bellers in and of themselves, and I don't know if you have a good site plan you want me to use, Jason. I have one, but I don't know if it's most current. Okay, perfect. That's okay. So as Jason alluded to, the Bellers aren't opposed to this development. By and large, they have talked to the church, they've talked to Mr. Thielen, they understand what's going on. Obviously, Jude's in the development business. But just to reiterate, so their parcel, they have 10 acres right here. That's their home. This is where they live. They have 5 kids. I can tell you from experience, those 5 kids and their family, we take full use of all 10 acres. So it's used as a family residence. With this development, I think they understand everything that's going on. There's a couple issues, a couple items that they've been working with the church to kind of understand. And the point of me being here is not necessarily to oppose it, but we understand that the planning board, you know, the ability to place conditions, make sure that the parties keep talking. In particular, there's a concern, or not necessarily a concern, but one of the items that they're talking with the church about is this is the north side of their property. The idea was there's going to be some sort of natural landscaping buffer there's going to be a lot of church traffic in there. They want to make sure that there's a natural screening that's going to go on there, car lights, all that sort of stuff. They don't want, a bunch of stuff shining into their property, considering its existing use. The same is true along Gray Fawn. So Gray Fawn, they have an easement to use that. And I know Mr. Thielen and his team have some design for landscaping and whatnot. We want to make sure that those conversations, and maybe perhaps as part of your approval, the parties can continue to have those discussions as to how they address the landscaping to make sure that as Jude and Alexis utilize this property for residents, they're protected from these heavy uses that are going in here. The other sort of thing to be mindful of, and what it's kind of hard to depict on this plan, but what's been proposed is essentially there's going to be 4 exit and entry points off of these properties. That's a lot. And the thing that I know Jason and Jude are talking about is how do you, as they exit here, this is their exit. This is their only exit. If we're doing stuff down here, which, I think this is, the idea is maybe to close this off, we want to have further discussions about, I assume, the rerouting up there. But it's those types of things that I think, as Jude and Alexis look at this from their residential standpoint, they want to make sure that they have answers. They want to make sure they're clear, because again, it's their house. Now, with that said, being in the development business, being in real estate, they're also mindful of where they situate in the city of Omaha. 192nd, we know what's going on up here with Avenue 1. We know that this property sits in an area that is going to be developed. They've accepted that too, that perhaps the time has come that they need to sell their residence. So with that in mind, the second theory in all this, and the thing that they want to make sure that the discussions continue to be had, is they don't want to do anything or agree to anything, especially with respect to these entrances and exits onto that street, that hamper their ability to develop their property. That just has not been explored yet. And I know Jason has been working with his team to try and figure out solutions as to how they can best go about that. To my knowledge, they haven't necessarily agreed on that. I think there's been informal discussions with the church. Informally, they've agreed, absolutely, we'll work with you. But again, we're just here to put it on the record formally that we hope those discussions continue to be had even after, assuming you all approve this and as we work towards city council. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions, and we appreciate your time.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other proponents? Are there any opponents? Okay, if you plan to speak, come on down, give your name and address.
Hello, my name is Susan Nicely. I live at 930 South 192nd Street, and I'm not familiar with how to use all this, but we'll try. So I'm here today as a concern. We have actually had a couple of meetings. Oh, don't tell me I forgot my, here it is, okay. I had to write this out because I'm so nervous. Had a couple of meetings with the church, as Mr. Thielen suggested. We met last February or so with our potential buyers with senior living. And in the process of meeting with them, we found that the church was developing. So we asked if we could get together and meet. Jason put together a luncheon. At that luncheon, we discovered that the church had been in discussion with our assisted living people and had kind of lured them over. My suspicion is that they were offered no cost for infrastructure, that the church was going to carry the cost of roads and that they wouldn't have to deal with that. So it was definitely more appealing for them to move to that site. In our process then, we didn't have an opportunity to go ahead and proceed with cooperation and development since we didn't have a buyer for our property at that time. So this here is the back
Susan?
end. Yes, sir.
Will it work if you turn that?
Oh, okay,
to,
sure.
Or
This way?
north
Is that
is
better?
up? There you go. That's fine.
Okay, yeah, no, please help me. Thank you.
You bet.
This is 190. No, I turned it.
190. Yeah,
this
you
is
were right.
192nd Street.
192nd.
Goes north and south. Okay, and then this is actually the quarter-mile access of Leavenworth, which goes onto our property. So as you can see, A&E suggested that we go straight through here, and that then we would have about an acre and a half or plus of extra land to the north of our property that would be sectioned off from the rest of our property. So we didn't know how we'd be able to use that. They suggested putting a daycare in there. And we thought, well, with that potential, maybe that would work for us. But at that time, we weren't able to do anything. We didn't have any potential buyers. So then over the next several months, until about this past January, our resources changed, and it became apparent that we might have an opportunity to work with them again. So we contacted them in January and asked if we might be able to work together. They were hesitant, and we pressed them. We said, can't you maybe just come up with some action points that we could address and maybe make this work so we could both, get this development going. So we had a letter that this kind of shows some of our action points. We were in discussion with them about, and at one point we were submitting a potential site plan to the city planner's office, and they said, well, let's see what your site plan is. We want to know if it's going to meet our road needs. So we submitted it to them. That site plan was not approved, so we weren't able to move forward with that connection. But in the process, we also asked them for their site plan. And in their site plan, we assumed that it was going to be similar to what they showed us before, where the church was up there and designated residential. They showed us nothing but the church. So at that time, we thought, oh, okay. Well, on February 13th, they invited us to a meeting, which they were required to do. They had submitted their plan to the city, which is now the plan that you are being presented. Do I have that in the right orientation? Let's see.
There you go.
Okay, thank you. And in that, it showed that they were now taking a daycare and an assisted living, which we had originally planned to put on our property, which would then carry the cost of infrastructure. When this was presented, we were a little bit in shock because we didn't realize that they were going to take those uses after having taken our assisted living people before. Apparently this was kind of their MO. So we said, well, are you interested in working on a road development for the quarter mile? And they said, nope. And then they said, do you have any other questions? And we said, I guess not. So we walked away from that meeting. They proceeded to give us notice of other meetings that they had with this plan. We did not attend because we really didn't have anything else to add. Since we weren't going to be able to participate, I didn't want to do any cooperative deal, then we did not join in their conversation. So at this point then, so we have, let me make sure I get the orientation right. We have 6.7 acres, which becomes problematic for these smaller pieces, similar to the Bellers and the Dailies. When you have to carry the cost of infrastructure, it almost devalues your land. I mean, we have a 3,200 square foot ranch on 7 acres on 192nd Pacific, which is pretty valuable. So in order to improve that, we need to be able to have a higher density or something that's going to carry the cost of that infrastructure in order to make the roads come through. So at this time, this was their plan. Again, I got to get this in the right orientation.
No,
Yeah, so 190 seconds here. Is this right? 190, oh, we want to go north.
Yep. There you go.
There we go. So this was our assisted living and our 2 acres for potential daycare use, and the road, as they were suggesting, coming straight through. The other thing that we have problematic is the Pacific Renaissance designed a road that came halfway through our property and did not connect to the Daily property, which they abut to. And at that time, we didn't understand that that was going to be a problem. And actually, I was out of town at that meeting, so I didn't have a chance to ask why they don't just go ahead and connect there. My contention is it's more cost effective if the two of us have a road to share the cost of the infrastructure. So at this point, with the road coming through our property, then connecting to theirs, which is their proposition, we don't have shared cost and are unable to proceed with a development. So in this case, if we're going to develop a property, I have again, this is Nicely property, this is the Daly property, this is the Beller property, this is the Everett property. The Everett property is 20 acres, 20 plus acres. These are all 10-acre pieces. Ours is less than 10 acres. And this is Grayfawn Avenue, maybe just Grayfawn, and 192nd Avenue, which are existing roads that the Everetts have an easement to that gives them the right to improve. And we actually don't have rights to that road. It's a private road. So with that being a private road, my perspective is it makes more sense to for these people to be able to improve, as the Bellers were saying, that they need a heavier use or somebody that's going to bring in water and sewer, as this demonstrates. Get us going the right perspective.
There you
There we
go.
go. Can you guys see that? Okay. Whoa. Do left here. All right. This is how the land flows. So the water runoff goes towards this direction, down to this detention pond that they're proposing, and also their wetlands that they have. So for the Bellers and the Dalys to be able to connect to sewer and have storm drainage, they need to be coming this direction. So without the improvement of Grayfawn, these folks don't have opportunity to connect to sewer and water. The 8th mile connection that they're proposing is also a private road, so it does not carry the same weight of bringing in the infrastructure to this heavy use development. So the heavy use of this is a concern without having infrastructure. The fact that it blocks off the ability for then Fire Ridge needs to access through a couple of points here. It would come through the Daly property. My proposition would be that they would share a road between the Daly and the Bellers, whether they want to develop this year or 50 years from now. This is going to be a less expensive shared cost. But again, there needs to be water and sewer because you can't go uphill into Fire Ridge to connect to that. I guess my concern today is that this hasn't been significantly addressed, the Grayfawn Road issue. I think that needs to be resolved before there's any approval on density, any changes to the conditional uses. I just don't think it's been addressed sufficiently to carry what needs to be done for future development in this area. The issue of sidewalks and all of that related to these roads, none of that has been addressed. A buffer between their property and our property has not been addressed. When they said they didn't want to work with us anymore, we didn't feel like there was an opportunity for conversation, that they just kind of, nope, we're done. The city's not going to require us to do anything else, so we're not going to. So that's why we have a board, a zoning board, because you folks have an ability to come in and see a vision bigger than the city's committed to municipal code, committed to the master plan, and their hands are tied to some degree because of that. So if you want to do an exception to that, then we have to appeal to you folks. And so that's kind of where I'm at, and hoping that you folks are going to go ahead and task the city to go ahead and address these issues that maybe it isn't required by the city municipal code or the master plan, but that those things are addressed. One of the things I recognize is Leavenworth is actually the quarter mile, and that these two streets don't meet. I know there's several places in Omaha where they don't meet. It's not ideal, it's not the best, but if these people are improving and this doesn't get improved, you're leaving all these people hanging. And I don't think that that's a good plan for an overall picture of development for that area. I think that's all I've got. I appreciate your time. Thank you for letting me speak today.
Okay, thank you, Susan. Are there any other opponents?
Hello, my name's James Dean, 503 South 195th Street. I'm a resident in Fire Ridge. I'm also on the Fire Ridge HOA board. Not sure exactly how this works. I'm also here with a fellow neighbor, Dan Hartman, which is, he asked us to kind of combine, so. Just looking at this property,
James, do you want to give that a turn? And then, there you go.
is that better? Okay. Just to show you where my residence is right here. That backs up to the property, and Mr. Hartman's is right next to mine. We do have a tree row there. On this tree row, there's probably 10 to 12 large trees that are dead out of 30 or 40. These have not been removed. They have not been maintained over the years, and it's just become an area for trash to collect with the wind. It's actually on Mr. Everett's property, but it backs up to our yards. And we have restrictions with our covenants on fencing, so even with fencing, it would not really, it just collect trash. So what I'm asking is that you, before they are approved or can proceed with this property, I don't have problem with the church. When I built my house, I knew that someday there was a chance that I would have a development behind me. I'm asking that this area is cleaned up as far as dead trees and have them replaced, and also some ground coverage as far as mulch or something of that sort. I'm also asking that we get the same buffer zone that Mr. Beller, I believe, has. They're showing that they're adding trees for Mr. Beller. We'd like the same on our side, and it maintained. As far as the church and the development, I'm fine with that. I'm more about the buffer zone, maintaining that area. We've had to look at these trees. I've tried to work with Mr. Everett. As far as doing the maintenance myself, I'll just cut them down or do whatever. But I'd like those trees replaced, and then I'd add more added to the buffer zone. I do have a question too. From the parking lot to the property line on this west side, there's really no measurement there, so we don't know how far it is from our property line to their parking lot. Not that I'm against, you have to have parking for the church, but I'd like to know how close it's going to be, and if they need to expand their parking, is that going to be approved later on to expand up to our property line or have something like that? So that's my main concern. And then also with the traffic going on Harney Street, I know some gentlemen here that live on Harney are a little more educated on that than I am, and they're going to talk. But there might be some other areas that would make more sense as far as bringing a through street to Fire Ridge. But if you have any questions, I can answer those. Otherwise, I appreciate your time.
Thanks, James.
Thank you.
Are there any other opponents? How many people wish to speak yet on that? Okay. If you want to come, if both of you want to come on down, you're sure welcome to. And then make sure you give your name and address.
Dan Bodis, 19503 Harney Street. My residence is right there, so right out the end of 195th and Harney Street. I know we're not supposed to be redundant, but just to hit on the same thing quickly as Mr. Dean had mentioned, we would absolutely like the same consideration from a buffering standpoint. I had submitted a letter to you folks in reference to that.
Could you move over by the microphone, please?
Sorry. I had made reference to the buffering concern as well. Currently a tree line there, but with future use with the church, lights, sight lines, all those things, definitely I think we deserve the same consideration as the Beller property. In addition to that, I was involved with what is now the Avenue 1 project 3-4 years ago. In regard to the Harney Street connection, previously, and I'm not sure if this is official or not, but when that was approved, we were working on that in the last few years. What's showing here as Harney Street was called Farnham Street. As the gentleman from E&A had mentioned, Farnham Street is a much better and currently through street all the way to 204th Street. As it stands right now, Harney Street is only 2 blocks long from 195th to 197th, and it's divided by a natural area. A ditch separates Pacific Woods and Fire Ridge. So to me, it doesn't make sense to try to have this kind of jagged connection, if you will, from Harney Street to the north when there will be connection to Farnham and then ultimately with Avenue 1 through HWS Cleveland Boulevard. So I absolutely object to the connection of Harney Street for those reasons. I also object because of a couple other items. Again, my residence is right here. My concern with the design of this street, if it absolutely has to go through, I don't like the idea of a curved street, number one. I can see where traffic could be coming at a pretty high rate of speed, and frankly, it's pointed right at my house. So whether there's issue of lights and so on, but from a safety standpoint, that's a pretty tight curve where, again, vehicles could be speeding at a pretty high rate. Again, if it had to be opened up, I would prefer to see more of a, I guess technically it wouldn't be a T, but an L intersection, something that would cause calming to keep that traffic slower if absolutely it must be the case. But again, as I mentioned, Farnham Street, I think is a much more natural connection point, and through HWS. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
David Skvinsky, 19516 Harney Street. Dan stole a lot of my thunder here, what I wanted to talk about. But I'm representing the people on Harney Street. It was a holiday weekend, but we did manage to go out. The red boxes, the boxes represent homeowners on Harney Street. The red shaded represent the homeowners that are opposed to the Harney Street connection. Again, not opposing what the church is doing. This is just opposing the Harney Street connection. Hopefully you guys received that in a letter. And then we did start a petition. I've got 2.5 pages of folks that signed on Harney Street that were also opposed.
Did you want to submit those to us, the petition?
I did submit them to
We
Mike
have them.
Carter.
Okay.
Here's kind of the blue box represents the Fire Ridge neighborhood here. And on the very north side of the neighborhood, you have the Fire Ridge School, a city park, and the Fire Ridge clubhouse, which has a pool, tennis courts, and basketball courts. The neighborhood pedestrian traffic follows HWS Boulevard to the north. You'll always have this method for pedestrians. Our concern is by adding more traffic to Harney Street is just going to congest that, or actually we feel it's a safety issue, adding any more traffic. You have school children going to the school and to the pool, like I mentioned, tennis courts, all the recreational areas. Currently today, is there a way to zoom in? Do I control that, or the zoom in button? Right in this area here, we do have a tree buffer zone today, and we'd like to be good neighbors with the church. If that tree buffer could remain in place and not install that connection, that would keep the parking lot lights from the church and any of the traffic lights from coming through. So I guess that's our request, and opposition to connecting Harney Street. And like Dan Lotus mentioned, some of these other connections seem like they make a lot more sense. You have HWS Boulevard that comes through, and as it connects up here, you have a calming device, but some of these other connections do not show, including Harney connection. There's no type of roundabout where it was included with the Avenue 1 project. Any questions for me?
Nope.
Okay, appreciate your time. Thank
Thank you, David. Are there any other, Susan, did you want to come back up? Okay, yes, you can come back up.
I apologize. My name is Susan Nicely, live at 930 South 192nd Street. There's one more proposal that if we were able to have had a conversation with the Everett developers, we would have liked to have made this suggestion. So if they are not allowed to improve this, we were offering to donate land off of our property so that they might be able to develop the quarter mile at the correct connection. So at this point, the only thing that we can offer is land donation, but we would be willing to do that where, excuse me, it would cut in, and then with the easement right that they have for Gray Fawn Road, they would be able to go ahead and improve that according to their rights. That's all I had to add. Thank you.
Thank you, Susie. Are there any other opponents? I'm going to close the public hearing. Jason, if you would like to come up and address
I would, thank you.
the points that have been raised.
I think I'll start with the homeowners and the buffer yard, and I'll get to Mrs. Nicely. So at the homeowners association meeting, the trees were brought up along that property line, and then at that time we said that we would work with them. At the time was to try to not remove any of that natural, I'm sure they're probably all volunteers over the years, but that natural tree, as many trees as possible during the grading process. So we'll continue to work with them. The trees they see here aren't a requirement of a buffer yard. Buffer yard's really space. Landscaping is not required within the code, but we do have a mitigation component of this project. There's actually quite a bit of trees, natural canopy located on the site, and so that's why you see this location. As a matter of fact, in our discussions with Mr. Beller, he would actually like to see those trees moved over and up against the northern part of our property, as it would open up other opportunities for development down the road. And so I think we can work out something. It has to be located within an outlot, and we do have to try to recreate canopy. So I can't just individually plant trees and meet that code requirement, but we can probably work on putting groups of trees in that area and use that as mitigation. So I think that's an easy fix and something we did discuss at that neighborhood meeting as well. Parking lot distance is about 150 feet as well, and if I go back to the grade, it sits pretty low, again 10-12 feet down from the property line. So there isn't a terrible lot of room for expansion, and as you can see, that is all slope at that location. So they would have to push that back, put a retaining wall in, and as my understanding, this is, as I advise all my clients when we do use permits, we put our maximum amount of building square footage on that property, and that way, if we want to come back and do additions, we can without having to come back in front of the public body for approval, and this is the maximum that this facility will be, to my knowledge, at this time. It doesn't mean it won't change down the road, but hey, what do I know? So trees on the access here, I'm sure Mr. Haas will probably not be okay with an L or a 90-degree access, and we do need to come in radial to that curve. We completely understand where the neighbors come from. We would support that decision if that was something that the board decided to not have us make that connection as well. Okay, to address this nicely, I went through the time frame for you all up front for specifically this purpose, to show you the amount of time and effort that was put in place with the Niceleys involved in that project all the way up to August of last year roughly. To suggest that we stole uses or that we didn't work with them or that we didn't try to help them it frustrates me from the standpoint of being involved in the process the whole time. The discussions really broke down from the standpoint when the crux of the issue for her property is not us. Oops, I get my note there wrong. It's twofold. As we all know, if you bring in a piece of property all by yourself and there's no one to help you, guess what you have to do? Put in infrastructure. That is not uncommon of any developer that comes up in front of you at any project whatsoever. So to suggest that they shouldn't have any costs associated with that, I think is just, I would love to have that option. We don't have that option as developers. It's part of the deal. It's part of what you do when you develop property. The crux of the issue with this user was twofold. One, Leavenworth has to come through. The city will not allow Gray Plume to be an access point, specifically because you have opposing left turns. So if I have a car coming here wanting to get into our development and turn at Gray Plume, and I have another car coming and they want to take a left onto Leavenworth, they meet in the middle head on. I do not think the city or anyone wants head-on collisions at that location. That's why eventually gray plume will go away, and that's why they limit access points to the quarters and the halves and right in, right outs at the eights on arterial roads. It's just too much of a traffic danger in terms of left turns. So that is not an option for us. Two, Leavenworth needs to match up to this location. Again, wanting to shove all the infrastructure costs onto everybody else, or, you know, again, we would love to not have to take on those responsibilities as well as developers. It's just not part of the deal. Swinging that road down still doesn't save from the fact that this road has to come through some way, shape, or form. There was a public hearing on Pacific Renaissance that was approved 4 times at 4 public hearings for preliminary and final plat. That road location could have been discussed. My understanding was discussed at the time, and that's where it ended up. It is not going to be moved. The street's in. So for the developer that had her property under contract, once they figured out they had to bring that road down and had to bring Leavenworth through, there was simply not enough acres on the property to justify the amount of units. Remember, at this location, it's R5 zoning, so it's 14.5 units per acre. You're not going to get more than that. And this group needed to be north of 80 units per acre. When you take in consideration of the right-of-way, detention she has to have on her property if they develop it separately, along with the road, it's less than 4 acres of developable property. 4 times 14, roughly 50, right? 70 units. So that's how that happened. The things we were offering during that situation, she has to have detention on her site. Everybody does. It's a requirement. We were going to combine detention. We offered that at that time. We offered to share Leavenworth cost with our project. We were going to take density, because we didn't need all the density of our project, and had agreed with the city that we were able to transfer units to her property, which would have added value to it. Okay? And then, because we were sharing detention with her, we were able to create the daycare lot, or could have been any other number of civic uses on her site, again, adding value. Those discussions broke down for numerous reasons, but it certainly isn't from the fact of us taking users and not being forthcoming in what we were doing. Assisted living user that's on our site wasn't even in the discussion at the time that we had the Nicely's project. That user's gone. It's a new user. And they need 5 acres. So from that standpoint, we've done everything we can to work with Mrs. Nicely, and at the time she decided it wasn't for her to work with us, and so we had to go our own way. And that's how that came about. I'd be happy to answer any of the questions you have.
Does the board have any questions for the applicant?
Hey, Jason? Yes. I'm sorry. I waited till you sit down so I beat you up a little. One of the gentlemen asked about a different route from Harney. I think it was HWS. Was that ever considered as a point of entry into the development?
Off of Harney Street here?
No, he said an alternative would be to enter the development through, I think it was HWS, which would be 2 streets up, it looks like.
We can't. HWS is here.
I think it was going to farm.
It was going to farm.
Yeah, this street eventually will be in. It will probably not be in by the time we start.
Right.
So that will be Harney Street, or whatever they're deciding to call it, will be eventually our full intersection movement over to this location that matches up with the Avenue 1 development.
Okay.
I think he might have been referring to this section of, well, we're calling it Street A because we don't have a name for it yet, but however it once gets named, but I think that's what they were maybe referring to is HUS Cleveland is a better route up and over instead of pushing cars through their neighborhood.
Right.
If I recall.
Yeah.
Have I looked at a different option for that? Is that your question?
Yes.
I haven't,
Okay.
because I don't know. Public Works requests this access. I don't really have another option for that.
Okay.
I don't know where those streets are already in, so I don't know what else to do with it.
Okay, thanks.
You bet.
Somebody over there had a question. Go ahead.
You got to come. You want to call them up?
I called them up.
All right.
I seconded
It's either David Skabinski, 19516
There you go.
Harney
Thank
Street.
you.
It was either Dan Bodis or I that brought this up, but you might zoom in. This is HWS Cleveland Boulevard, and as you follow this through the neighborhood, this would be Pacific Street, and this is the entrance into the neighborhood currently. It goes through the entire neighborhood and then pops out through here and goes through the roundabout and then enters into the Avenue 1 project. Continues on to exit onto 192nd Street. To me, that makes a lot of sense. It starts from one end of the neighborhood, goes all the way through, and then exits out, instead of adding these extra pieces of cross traffic.
David?
Yes.
Just to make a point on the connections there on Harney, at the east end of Harney, that's been a stub street with a temporary turnaround ever since the development was developed, Fire Ridge was developed. That was always intended to be a connection street. The only reason I'm bringing that up is we run into this quite a bit when we're talking about new developments or SIDs coming on board with another SID and interconnection. And it's tough to build a city when we don't connect our neighborhoods. Otherwise, we've got everybody out on a collector street, and you'd have too much traffic. And so that was always there. So it should never have been a surprise to you that someday that was going to go through.
I understand your point.
Okay.
The only thing is, to the east of us, if it would have been another neighborhood that we tied into with residential, this way we have it tying into commercial.
Gotcha. Well, yeah, I understand your point, but okay.
Thanks.
Any other comments or questions from the board? We'll hear from the city. Eric?
Okay, so we have quite a few different reports here for different requests. I guess I will kind of take them one by one, starting with the plat and rezoning requests, then onto the PUD, and then onto the three either conditional or special use permits.
Let's just go with, well, unless you think you need to combine them all, we could just do agenda item number 3, and then we'll get your recommendation on 14, if that works for you.
Okay, yep.
All right.
That is acceptable. So for case number 3 with the plat and rezoning, the department is recommending approval of the rezoning from AG to DR, R5, and R6, subject to submittal of acceptable final PUD plans prior to forwarding the request to City Council. Approval of the preliminary plat subject to the 29 conditions listed in the recommendation report. Prior to or concurrently with submittal of the final plat.
Okay. You want to talk about the PUD on?
Well, I guess however you'd like to handle it. You
Well,
can either make that vote
let's just go now.
for that request.
Do we have a motion on the preliminary plat?
I'll move approval of the rezoning from AG to DR, R5 to NR6, subject to submittal of the acceptable final PUD plans. Prior to forwarding this request to City Council, and approval of the preliminary plat, subject to the following 29 conditions that are outlined in the report.
Did we have a second? Okay, we have a motion and a second. Debbie, will you record the vote, please?
Pate,
Yes.
Morris,
Yes.
Megan,
Yes.
Rosacker,
Yes.
Moore,
Yes.
Mr. Sheriff.
Yes.
3-0.
Okay, back to Eric.
Sure. Regarding the PUD overlay district, this specifically references to the low-density apartment style residential lot. There are a few items that we view that are not fully compliant with all of the applicable zoning regulations. So we are recommending layover to allow a few tweaks. There's not a lot of major changes, but we do have some suggestions on slightly alternate design as well as, street yard landscaping percentage, maximum floor area ratio, a few minor details that are slightly off. So for the PUD, we're recommending layover.
Okay, do we have a motion on the PUD?
Motion to lay over the PUD request.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Debbie, will you please record the vote?
Morris,
Yes.
Megan,
Yes.
Wolfpacker,
Yes.
Moore,
Yes.
Pate.
Yes.
Harris.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to move on to agenda item 14 for Eric's recommendation.
Yeah, so for-
City's recommendation.
The first report in your agenda is for the special use permit to allow assisted living. I guess just one brief comment for all of the parking lots that was discussed and brought up by the neighbors. There will, as all of these use permits are adjacent to residential zoning, there will be a requirement for 4-foot tall landscape screening from any parking lot to prevent headlights from shining into adjacent properties. So I just wanted to touch on that because it is applicable to some of the different use permits. But for this special use permit, we are recommending approval to allow assisted living in R5 district, subject to the 7 conditions listed in the recommendation report, prior to being forwarded to City Council.
Okay, do we have a motion on the assisted living?
I'll make a motion for the approval of special use permit to allow assisted living in an R5 urban family residential district.
Second.
Did you want to include the 7 recommendations?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes,
as part of
sorry.
his motion.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Debbie, will you please record the vote?
Megan,
Yes.
Wolfpacker,
Yes.
Moore,
Yes.
Pate,
Yes.
Morris,
Yes.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Okay, the next report in agenda item 14 is for the special use permit to allow daycare services general in a R5 district. This is for Lot 3 of Everett Place. One item that I do want to bring up is this request will require approval of a waiver from the Zoning Board of Appeals. Our zoning code limits the capacity of daycare in low-density residential districts, which this is, to a limit of 12 individuals. The code was intended to allow that limit for single-family residential structures, which obviously that is not the case for this site. So we are supportive of the waiver, but I just wanted to point that out. The department is recommending approval of the special use permit to allow daycare services general in R5 district, subject to the 7 conditions listed in the report being addressed prior to the request going to City Council.
Thank you, Eric. Do we have a motion for the daycare?
Move to approve the special use permit to allow daycare services general in a R5 district, subject to the 7 conditions outlined in the recommendation report.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Debbie, will you please record the vote?
Wolfpacker,
Yes.
Moore,
Yes.
Pate,
Yes.
Morris,
Yes.
Megan,
Yes.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
And the final item in Agenda 14 is a conditional use permit to allow the religious assembly in R5 Urban Family Residential District. And this request does include a waiver of Section 55-206 height for the 55-foot tall church and steeple. The zoning code allows either the planning board or city council to waive height with a use permit. So that waiver would not be needed to go to the zoning board of appeals. I just wanted to touch on that since Jason misspoke on that earlier. So, once again,
Do we need to include that in our motion?
yes, it will be. Yep.
It's already in as part of the,
Yeah,
Okay.
but you would want to specifically state that. There are a few items that would need to be addressed before we can issue the conditional use permit for this. And, it's not even valid until a final plat was recorded and the rezoning goes through. But this request does not go on to City Council like the others do. The department is recommending approval of the conditional use permit to allow religious assembly in R5 district with a waiver of Section 55-206, height to 55 feet, subject to the 6 conditions listed in the report.
Okay, do we have a
A
motion?
motion to approve of the conditional use permit to allow religious assembly in the R5 district with a waiver of section 55-206, height to 55 feet, subject to the 5 conditions.
6 conditions. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Debbie, will you please record the vote?
Moore,
Yes.
Page,
Yes.
Morris,
Yes.
Magid,
Yes.
Rosehacker,
Yes.
Bear.
Yes. Okay. We're going to move on to the regular agenda. It's agenda item number 4. Case C3-18-26. Applicant is Planning Department on behalf of the City of Omaha. Request approval of the Dahlman Rose TIF redevelopment project plan. Location 1903 South 7th Street. Don, representing the city, will you?
Yeah, Don Seaton, Omaha City Planning. We'll start with identifying the site and getting oriented. This is the Dahlman Rose project is redevelopment of a site that's just a little over 1 acre, about 2 blocks south of Dahlman Park. The project involves the development of 30 for-sale market units. These are row house units, a mix of 2 and 3 bedroom units arranged in 8 structures. So these 7 are 4 units attached, and this is a 2-unit structure. The owner developer is Dahlman Rose LLC. Benjamin Catt is the managing member. I indicated this was a vacant parcel. This is what it looked like about a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years ago. Kind of weedy, overgrown, neglected. Had been a commercial floral shop and greenhouse project or land use. The greenhouses were in pretty poor shape. The site's been cleared since then, but it's been underutilized for a while, and redevelopment is something that really is good as a TIF project, I believe, for this site. The proponents have worked well with the neighborhood. They've had a couple of meetings. They reached out to the neighborhood. They've modified the design of the project based on neighborhood input. They've also worked really closely with the city's urban design staff. Going back to that site plan for a moment, I would note that a fair amount of public improvements, actually a fairly substantial amount of public improvements are involved in this project. The main lines, utility lines under Cedar and Center Street will be connected with a trunk line or main line utility lines going through the site. In addition, Cedar Street is presently a gravel street. It will be reconstructed to city standards. So there's a fairly substantial amount of public improvements involved in this project. The design has been evolving a little bit as we've gone through the TIF process, but that's a good thing because, like I said, they've been working with the city and working with the neighbors. That gives you one perspective. This is more of an oblique aerial perspective. But anyway, the project is a $10.3 million investment. The TIF support requested is $1,750,000. The project is consistent with the city master plan and meets the criteria and requirements of the TIF program. We ask for your approval.
Any questions?
Yeah, just a question or two.
Yes.
In the renderings, it appears that every unit has garages, right, for parking?
Yes, there's
Okay, so
parking
there's
on the lower level.
probably limit the on-street parking then as a result of having the garage units
Correct.
in there.
Yep.
Okay. Because that's an awful lot of apartments or homes.
It's a fairly high-density project in that older neighborhood. That's also a site that's zoned general commercial. There are other uses that could go in there by right that would be more problematic.
Yeah, no, it's a great project for that area. Yeah. I just want to make sure there were going to be adequate parking.
Adequate parking.
Okay, thank you, Don. Just want to remind the people that came here and requested for this agenda item, the Dahlman Rose, agenda item number 10 was on for approval. That's been taken off, and you'll have time to come up and give your concerns or support or opposition at that time. But this is for the TIF financing right now, so. And number 10 will be taken in its regular order on the agenda. Okay, are there any other proponents?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Brent Beller, 1144 West Center Road, appearing on behalf of the project applicant, Dolman Rose. With me today is Benjamin Catt. I think for this point, as you said, we're going to probably be talking a little bit more on item 10. So I think Mr. Seaton did a fine job representing where we are with respect to TIF, and we appreciate your consideration and here for any questions.
Okay. Are there any opponents that wish to speak at this point, or do you want to wait till agenda item number 10 comes up? Okay. We're going to close the public hearing. Does the board have any comments or? Okay. May we hear from the city?
Department recommends approval.
Do we have a motion?
Motion for approval. Second.
We have a motion and a second. Debbie, will you record the vote, please?
Pate,
Yes.
Morris,
Yes.
Megan,
Yes.
Rosacker,
Yes.
Moore,
Yes.
Mr. Chair.
Yes. Okay, don't go anywhere, Don.
Okay.
We'll move on to agenda item number 5, case C3-18-57, applicant Planning Department on behalf of the City of Omaha. The request approval of the Urban Chiral Condominiums TIF redevelopment project plan, location 714 South 15th Street.
Yes, Don Seaton, City Planning. This is a project in our downtown, located right here on 714 South 15th Street. The Urban Chiral project involves a full and complete thorough rehabilitation of a 1910 brick historic building, a two-story structure that was placed on the National Register in 2011. 2 stories, about 11,485 square feet. The rehab project will have 3 condominium units when completed. 2 of those units will be residential units in the upper level, and the 3rd unit will be a commercial unit in the lower level. The owner-developer is Urban Chiral LLC, Lauren Schiffer-Miller, manager. Public improvements include curb, gutter, sidewalks, some landscaping. They've worked with our urban design team and city planning as well on the streetscaping, and some alley improvements along the back side of the building are included as well. Total project cost is about $3.5 million. The TIF support being requested, $348,436. Project complies with the city master plan, meets the criteria and requirements of the TIF program. We ask for your approval.
Okay, thank you, Don. Are there any other proponents that wish to speak?
Good afternoon. Kendra Ringenberg, 1318 North 187th Street. I represent Urban Chiral, and Laura Schiffer-Miller is here if you have any questions or concerns. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Any other proponents? Any opponents? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Does the board have any questions or comments? Eric, may we hear from the city?
Sure. Department recommends approval.
Okay.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Debbie, will you record the vote, please?
Morris,
Yes.
Megan,
Yes.
Rosacker,
Yes.
Moore,
Yes.
Pate,
Yes.
Mr. Chair.
Yes. We'll move on to agenda item number 6, case C3-95-72, Planning Department on behalf of the City of Omaha. Request approval of an amendment to the Campus for Hope redevelopment plan, location northwest of 16th and Nicholas Streets. Jennifer, where are you?
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to recuse myself from this.
Okay, thank you, Patrick.
Good afternoon, Jennifer Taylor, City Law Department. What you have before you today is actually second amendment to the Campus for Hope redevelopment plan. The original redevelopment plan was originally approved in 1995 and facilitated the construction of several buildings in the north part of the redevelopment area. The redevelopment area that is the subject of this plan actually goes from 16th Street on the east here to 18th Street on the west, what we refer to as the Kellum Green Belt on the north end of the property, and Nicholas Street on the south. The plan was then further amended in 2008 to facilitate some additional buildings that were constructed to support the Siena Francis Shelter and the services they provide. This amendment before you today will continue those efforts. The location of the project that's before you today, or the projects that are part of the subject of this amendment, are mostly along the east and southern end of the redevelopment area along 16th and Nicholas. The current uses in the area are the Bright Shelter, which is where the Siena Francis House houses their men's emergency overnight shelter, as well as some various administrative medical facilities. Then there's also at 1702 Nicholas, the original shelter building, which houses the emergency overnight shelter for women and the men's and women's recovery program. There's also a small building here at 1624 Nicholas that I think you guys may have driven by today, and that houses the current day shelter services that are provided by Siena Francis House. What the project amendment, the plan amendment that's before you proposes are essentially 5 different projects, a number of which will be undertaken by the city, and the major construction project will be undertaken by the Omaha Shelter for Homeless Trust, which is fundraising up to $15 million to construct a 43,000 square foot facility in roughly this kind of northeast section of the property. This plan amendment will allow the city of Omaha to actually participate in this project in a number of ways. First and foremost, what the city will do is undertake remediation of the property along 16th Street on the east side of the redevelopment area. This used to house a salvage yard, which has since been relocated, and all of the structures on that site have been removed. However, there still needs to be some environmental remediation and site preparation work that will be done. And the city will undertake that, as well as demolition of the existing day services building at 1624 Nicholas. The city will also install streetscaping all along Nicholas and 16th Street. And we also propose to, in the future, demolish the shelter building at 1702 Nicholas to further make way for future development. This will not occur until the new building is ready and this site has been vacated, and Siena Francis House tells us that they are ready to have us take that building down. Once all of the site preparation work is done by the city, a new shelter building will be constructed. Let's see, here we go, 16th Street. At this location on the site, just north of the Bright Shelter, along 16th Street, in the place where the salvage yard used to exist. In addition to undertaking the various things that the city will do, the city will also vacate 2 alleys that you'll notice come right through here. We'll vacate those 2 alleys. Siena Francis House actually owns all the property on which this project will be built, so the city doesn't need to acquire any property. This is going to be done in cooperation with the Siena Francis House and the Omaha Shelter for Homeless Trust.
Does that include the property that you said need to be remediated?
Yes. The remediation property is actually going to be the site of the new shelter. So this area in blue right along here is all going to be remediated by the city.
Okay.
There are representatives here from Omaha Shelter for Homeless Trust if you have any questions. Otherwise, I'm happy to answer anything I can.
Okay, thank you, Jennifer. Are there any other proponents that wish to speak?
David Lemke, architect with HDR, 8404 Indian Hills Drive. I'm here to answer any questions you might have.
Catherine French with Lamson, Dugan and Murray, 10306 Regency Parkway Drive. We are the legal counsel for Omaha Shelter for Homeless Trust, available to answer any questions if you have any.
Okay, thank you. Any other proponents? Are there any opponents? Okay, we're going to close the public hearing. Does the board have any questions or comments?
I just have a question to whoever might answer it, is what about the timing of the projects?
Jennifer Taylor, City Law Department. The city will actually undertake the demolition of the day services building within the next couple of months, and we will also commence and likely complete the remediation work by, I think, August, September, October of this year.
Okay. And then the construction of the new facility
Construction can
thereafter?
commence after that.
Okay.
But that will also be contingent on raising all of the necessary funds to construct the building.
All right. Eric, do you want to add anything?
No, other than that, I'd just say department recommends approval.
Do we have a motion?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Debbie, will you record the vote?
Megan,
Yes.
Rosacker,
Yes.
Pate,
Yes.
Moore,
Yes.
Mr. Chair.
Yes. We'll move on to agenda item number 7, case C3-18-58. Planning, applicant is Planning Department on behalf of the City of Omaha. Request approval of the 2018 Action Plan. Location, Omaha and 3 Mile extraterritorial jurisdiction. May we hear from Bill, please?
Yeah, good afternoon. Bill Lukash, Assistant Director of the Omaha Planning Department. Presented to you is the 2018 Action Plan for our Community Development Block Grant, Home, and Emergency Solution Grant funds. HUD has asked us to estimate the amount of funding we will have this year. In the past years, we may have had funding allocations known to us by now. We don't right now. They asked us to proceed with an estimate. These estimates that you see before you are based off of the previous 2 years, $4.3 million for CDBG. I may have misspoke earlier about that. $1.6 million for home and about $380,000 for emergency solutions grant funds. I'm here to answer any questions.
Okay. Bill, I want to say we got your report through email. I read not all of it. There's a lot there, but I read for about an hour. But from what I read, good report, good work.
Good. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Bet. Are there any other proponents? Any opponents? Close the public hearing. Any comments, questions of the board?
I'll just say, I've read them before, and we earned that money. That's a lot.
Okay. Did you want to add anything, Eric?
Just department recommends approval.
Do we have a motion?
A motion to approve.
Second. I have a motion and a second. Debbie, will you please record the vote?
Rosacker,
Yes.
Moore,
Yes.
Pate,
Yes.
Morris,
Yes.
Megan, Mr. Chair.
Yes. Okay, we're going to move on to agenda item number 9.
Mr. Chairman, I need to recuse myself.
Okay. It's case C10-18-61, C12-18-62. Applicant, Woodsonia 204 Center LLC, request preliminary plat approval of West Center Commons, a subdivision located outside the city limits with rezoning from AG to MU. Location, southeast of 204th Street and West Center Road. May we hear from the applicant's representative, please?
Yes. Well, no, there was more, but they were administrative. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Larry Jobin, 11440 West Center Road, appearing on behalf of the applicant, Woodsonia. Also with me today from Woodsonia is Jeff Elliott, and then also with me today is Brad Hike from TD2, the consulting engineers on this particular project. The property is located at the southeast corner of 204th and West Center Road, this being West Center Road, this being 204th Street, and then here's the subject property. As you can see, to the east, it's undeveloped farmland. To the south, you have the Rock Place, which is an ongoing business or an existing business. And of course, to the west, it's also undeveloped. So the acreage is about 36.51 acres. The usable portion is about 23.87 acres, and there's about 3.35 acres of outlots, and the rest is dedicated right-of-way. There are also 3 outlots. Zoom in a little bit. There are 3 outlots here. Outlot A is a drainage way and green space. Outlot B is a roadway here on the south side that runs between the east side of the property and the west side of the property. This will be a dedicated right-of-way down the road, So there will be a revised preliminary plat with the final plat that shows that this is going to be a publicly dedicated right-of-way to provide access to not only to the east but also the south of the proposed development. And then there's Outlot C here, which is a detention basin that also provides access to Outlot A, which is the drainage way. The rezoning is from ag to mixed use. This is at the intersection of 204th and West Center Road, 165-acre mixed-use center. So this is one of the largest mixed-use centers that we have under our master plan, one of them the second largest. We will be creating 8 developable lots, and they kind of go in order here from Lot 1, which is a proposed C-store. Lot 2, 3, and 4 are proposed retail uses. Lot 5 here is shown to be a 20,000 square foot office building with 10,000 square foot floor plates. Lot 6 is a dance studio, and Lot 7, which is kind of an interesting concept. This will be what I think is the first of its kind here. It's a 69 unit high-end car condominium project, and so it's kind of like the man cave where you can put your sports car there and you can go hang out there on the weekend. It also has a little clubhouse facility. It also has a portion of the square footage is used for retail, and also there'll be a small portion of the square footage used for high-end retail sales of cars. So it'll be kind of a unique use for this particular property, and I think one of the first of its kind in the metropolitan area. I know that people have been looking for this type of use for a long time. And then we have Lot 8, which is the multifamily portion of the development. There are 3 buildings here. There will be anywhere between 3 and 4 stories. The middle building actually will have also 10,000 square feet of retail on the first floor with apartments above, much like the project in Legacy in front of the Lifetime Fitness. So you have retail on the front or the first floor, and you have 2 or 3 stories of apartment units on the top. There'll be a linear plaza space along what is Haskell Street, 203rd Street, and then Spring Street. Here it's on the west and north side, and there'll be, of course, all the things that come with mixed use. There'll be the street trees, there'll be decorative fixtures as far as the street lighting, and pedestrian crosswalks in 2 different locations. I'm not sure you can see, but the one's here and one's here. And this is your, kind of your grouping of buildings in your plaza space. As far as access, just so you know, this is, of course, a state highway, Highway 31. It has controlled access, of course, from West Center Road until the 3rd mile. So typically you have access at the quarter mile, right, full movement. In this particular case, you have controlled access. This is the only opportunity for access to this property at this location and to the east as you go to 204th Street. And the reason why it has to have that distance from the on and off ramps of West Center Road. So again, you can't have a quarter mile access full movement. You have to have the 3rd mile access point for full movement here because of the controlled access in the state highway. So there has been a traffic study completed. There shows that there'll be a traffic signal day 1 at this particular intersection. There are 2 lanes that are inbound off southbound 204th Street, and there are 3 outbound lanes onto 204th Street. And the southbound left turn lane will have an extended left turn movement or left turn lane that will be pursuant to the traffic study. And then there will be a northbound dedicated right turn lane into what's referred to as Haskell Street. Access will be given to the Rock Place, which is the property to the south here. We will continue to work with the Rock Place owner as well as city staff, Public Works Department, to determine the appropriate configuration of the roadway system right here at this location. But it's important to note that this will be a public street that will be paved to the eastern boundary, and that the Rock Place will have access onto that public street in whatever location they choose to have. So with that, pretty simple mixed-use development. Obviously, the urban design code applies being mixed use. Here to answer any questions we have reviewed and the recommendation report of the staff and find the same acceptable. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
104th.
It's going to be done through a sanitary and improvement district, this development is, so there'll be an interlocal cooperation agreement that will be entered into probably between the county. The state typically doesn't enter into the interlocal cooperation agreements, but they give the authority to, by permitting, to get out onto the state highway to make whatever improvements that are necessary, including the traffic signal.
Is the Rock Place part of the SID?
No, they will not be.
Hey Larry, when you said day one, does that mean when the building starts for the street light or for the traffic signal, or does that mean when you have so many tenants in or spoken for?
My understanding, it'll be right away, so it'll be with the original improvements. So in our subdivision agreements, that calls for all the public improvements to be put in within 2 years after the recording of the final plat. That would be one of those improvements that would have to be put in. But my understanding is before there would be a certificate of occupancy here, that signal would have to be installed.
Thank you.
Larry, I'm not on your lot 7, I'm not familiar with the use of that. Talk a little bit about that, would you please explain that?
Lot 7,
Yeah.
the car condominium use.
Yeah.
So what it is there are 69 individual garages. They all have restrooms. That you can go there and store your high-end cars there. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, each unit's about $180,000 a piece just to store your car there. And of course, you have a clubhouse where whoever has their cars and their garages there can come in and hang out in the clubhouse. And it's really just kind of a man cave, but they're, again, a place to go out and with other car enthusiasts and have a place for your cars and hang out.
Do people work on their cars there?
No.
No?
No.
Okay.
No, it's not like a automobile garage or repairs and service. It is strictly for it's strictly for storage and showing your car and a place to hang out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How many cars can you fit in one of those?
That's a good question.
I saw the prospectus. It's like 850 feet most of it.
2 to 3, from what I understand. You can probably put a lift in there, I would assume. So.
60,000 a car.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions for Larry? Are there any other proponents that wish to come forward and speak? Are there any opponents? Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, board members. Rodney Dahlquist, 1403 Farnham Street, representing the Rock Place. The Rock Place is the neighbor immediately to the south, located at 3405 South 204th Street. I want to note the scope of the objection that my client has really isn't an existential one as it relates to the development itself. It's more as it relates to the ingress and egress coming off of 204th Street. And you have to understand what the Rock Place is out there. It is a landscaping business that sells boulders, aggregate, rocks, landscaping rocks. Deliveries come and go on a regular basis from there on 75-foot flatbeds, semi-trailers, things of that nature. So the road as proposed, I don't know if we can zoom in a little bit. Tried to do the best handwritten sketch alternative to what was proposed. But essentially the problem will be as a semi comes in off of 204th, you're going to have to make a turn, and then right here at kind of the perpendicular part to this curve, make another turn again, and then turn again. That's just probably a bit too tight and just not feasible for
the size of deliveries, and these are deliveries coming in as well as deliveries that the Rock Place has going out to various customers to make large deliveries. What this shows, and this isn't a very good drawing, but
We're looking to the east when we're looking at,
we are looking to the you're actually, let's see if I can align this properly. So here, this would be going to the, with 204th Street here, going to the north.
the top would be north.
Top would be north, yes.
Okay.
And of course, the most relevant portion of this photograph isn't present, but how it comes now is you come in here and you turn to the east, and then delivery trucks, and you'll see some of the size of these trucks are currently back here. The yard where aggregate is stored and where customers can walk back to is stored here to the east side of the building. But delivery trucks essentially now can turn, and they have a straight shot back to the yard, and there's ample turning room and turning radius for them back here to make deliveries and to load up for when they're leaving to make deliveries. Customers turn in here and then have separate access to where employees and customers alike park here. There's a little office, and then you'll see some of the boulders here. So what the proposed road would do is eliminate this. This would go away, and so the proposed road, or the current road now is right here. So you'll see that is essentially cut off. Customers and delivery trucks coming in and out alike would come in, turn, and then there would be one access into kind of this backyard where the storage was, that backyard area. The reference to the traffic study, and I haven't seen it, and I'm not 100% familiar with it, but as I understand it, there was a 24-hour traffic study done in February of this year. Well, of course, in February, you don't have anybody landscaping, you don't have deliveries coming in and out, and I think I articulated in the written objection presented to the board kind of what that higher traffic volume is during the summer, especially on the weekends when people are doing all the landscaping projects. You have semis coming in and out of this area on a regular basis at a much higher frequency than what was captured in that February study. So the objection, again, is not as to the development itself. It's just to ensure that what we have is safe ingress and egress here for customers and the semi-trailers alike.
So what would you propose as an alternative?
Thank you for asking. That was what I was going to get to here. So instead of coming in and making this kind of oddball turn and then turn and then turn again, what we're suggesting is that this comes straight back, very much like what now is in place for the delivery trucks, and that would allow adequate turning space and turning radius, and they wouldn't have to navigate through this kind of oddball snake-like turn here. It would come straight back, and then traffic going into the West Center Commons development would have more of a 90-degree turn here versus this curve. Delivery trucks could come back. This road that's currently in place here would remain, and there would be a break, kind of a, I'm sorry?
Off of the entrance road, a median break?
There is a median proposed right now. But what we would suggest is that remain for traffic leaving the Rock Place. So they could come, or I'm sorry, that would have to come, and that would be traffic coming in from the Rock Place, and then as it leaves, this would remain, and then there would be another road that comes in here, so then it would connect up here. Essentially what you've done by doing that is allowing the delivery trucks to kind of make safe navigation back to that storage area where they need to load and unload, and you've also allowed for traffic to kind of be diverted away from that truck traffic. The concern is if you get semis in here, more than one, maybe two or three at a time, and you have customers and both of the Rock Place or Western O'Connor. And you get semis caught in here, if we're gonna have a light here, we'll have a lot of congestion. And, to make this turn is just simply not safe for those delivery trucks.
Would your proposed road be on your land or their land or both?
And maybe you could speak to the actual border of that. Yeah, I think it would essentially be right where this is coming in marrying up to 204th now. It would come back, and maybe you can speak to where that line is exactly. Okay.
And then when, the other part you kind of brushed on, when say cars, customer cars, not the trucks, leave, then they're going to be pushed back to the east a little bit so they can get out to take a left in order to get to Center Street or to 204th Street. So they're not going to have because that'll be a median, right? So they're going to have to move a little bit to the east to get out?
That's correct.
Okay.
I'm going to call Ryan up, not right now, but could you put that
Absolutely.
diagram back up again? If we left the design, Ryan's with the city, if we left the curve in there, that design, but where you turn into the rock, if we flatten, and I'll have to ask Ryan if we can do that, if that was flattened, the south side of that street, that curb, where it'd almost be a little wider and make an ingress for you, what would that do for you?
Remember, the trucks have to leave too, though.
Well, yeah, that they could get out that way.
Go straight in and go straight out.
Yeah.
You're talking about this here?
Yeah,
Leave again,
if we
so
flatten right at that turn, flatten that drive. Well, I'll tell you what, let's hold on, and I'm going to ask Ryan when he comes up. So.
Very good. I hadn't considered that, so.
Okay.
Without having any thought. But principally, those are the objections. And like I said, it's not an existential objection to the development itself. It's just, we want to do this in a way that everybody's safe and that we're not hampering the access, because there's different types of vehicles going in and out of this place. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Okay, thank
And
you.
did you mention, do you want me to leave this up here?
Sure, if
Okay.
you could. Are there any other opponents? Hold on, Larry. I'm gonna close the public hearing, but Ryan, would you come up, please? And the question I'm fumbling through for you there, if that's a possibility of, you leave the curve coming into the mixed-use development, but you flatten their street going into the.
Yeah, Ryan Haas with the Public Works Department. We, as staff, as with any subdivision proposal, have to kind of respond to the plan in front of us. We met preliminarily with the applicant. I'm just giving you this as way of background.
Mm-hmm.
Met with the applicant, kind of walked through how they saw the subdivision laying out. We kind of gave some feedback based on the master plan and based on what limited information we had as far as how the neighboring property operated. From there, we encouraged them to meet with the neighbor and try to accommodate them to the extent that they could with the plan that they ended up submitting. After the submittal was made for the subdivision, we received phone calls from both neighbors, the neighboring property owner to the east. Their concerns, I believe, have been met with the conditions of approval as proposed. And then also I spoke at length with the proprietor of the Rock Place and then with also with Mr. Dahlquist on the issues. And based on our understanding, I certainly can see where they're coming from and with the concerns that they have. We relayed those concerns to the applicant. I think everyone's kind of aware generally of the issues that we're going to need to sort out. So I don't know that we're going to reach a resolution today, but we as staff recognize the importance of setting up this subdivision to succeed along with any future development both to the east and to the south in the event that the Rock Place would ever redevelop. But we also have to be mindful of their operations as well. And this needs to work. The goal would be to land on a solution that works collectively for everyone in both scenarios. So with that in mind, I would point out under the proposed plan, we would not anticipate this driveway closing, the current inbound driveway for customers. Yes, there would be a median there, and no, we could not support a median break for outbound customer traffic, but inbound customers could continue to use that like they do today. So then the question becomes, where do the outbound movements go for the customers? How do inbound and outbound semi-truck movements, how are those accommodated? That certainly, we understand that concern and would want to see a plan that works, again, with the applicant, for the applicant's plan and with the operations of those trucks. So there's a lot of moving parts, and again, we tried to set up our conditions of approval such that we could proceed conditionally with approval, but would anticipate continuing to coordinate collectively with the parties to try to land on an acceptable arrangement.
That's just, I'm not an engineer, but it doesn't appear that where you have that turn intersecting with the going straight there, it doesn't appear that turn radius is that difficult, or that.
Right there?
Yeah. So it looks like maybe 15% maybe?
Well,
10 degrees, I mean.
The problem with large semis is they off track. They need a large radius for their turning movement. If you don't provide that, they physically are going to go where they go, and then you get them hopping the curb, tearing up landscaping, damaging sidewalks and curbs and things like that. So where we know there's large trucks that would be turning there, we want to see a bigger return, a bigger radius on that corner to accommodate the truck turning movements.
More than what you're showing there on this?
Just eyeballing it, yeah. I mean, they're talking about the full-size semis, and those require significant amount of turning, especially turning on a narrow street. So even the street width would be a question. Really, nothing's nailed down at this time. It's going to depend on not just what the applicant's needs are and what the operations of the rock place are, but also the traffic study is going to need to tell us long-term, is this even an appropriate configuration for this intersection? Do we straighten it out so that this, generally east-west, maybe that's the major movement and this tees in there? Right. What's the traffic control there? Is it an all-way stop, a roundabout, a signal, things like that? We want to set it up where it's going to work now and in the future, where we don't have to go back and tear anything out. So again, that's not, I can't really offer a lot of answers as far as how this is going to end up. We have a lot of issues to work through, but we're comfortable again with the conditions that we kind of laid out, that we can continue to work and land there ultimately when the final plat comes back.
I would think you're going to want some sort of a stop sign at that dissecting point there, intersecting point there somehow. I mean, you got traffic coming from both ways and semis.
Yeah, we'll have to, the traffic study will be one of the things that we use to answer that question as far as traffic control.
Okay.
Can I bring Larry up? He looks like he's ready to jump out of his seat.
Can I make, actually, if I could make one more point of clarification, just to kind of clarify something Larry touched on as far as the traffic signalization out here. The intersection ultimately it's under NDOT's control, the State Department of Transportation. They generally don't permit activating signals until the signal warrants are met. So there's the potential where maybe the poles go up, but the signals themselves, red, yellow, green, you don't see those until sometime after, as traffic begins to increase as the subdivision builds out. So it may not necessarily be on day one. There may be some delay. That's happened elsewhere on this corridor, but just kind of a point of clarification on the signalization.
Okay. Thank you, Ryan. Larry, I hadn't forgotten about you. I just wanted to hear from Ryan before we heard from you.
Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Larry Jobin, 11440 West Center Road, appearing on behalf of the applicant. And we generally agree with what Ryan is saying, and we generally agree with the owner of the rock place to the south. Maybe we can flip that the other way. Is the light the wrong way, I think, isn't it? There you go. So currently, we're showing this roadway along the south as being a 50-foot, well, right now it's an outlot. We understand that we're going to come back and actually publicly dedicate the right-of-way with the revised preliminary and a final plat down the road. Currently, we're showing it being a 50-foot publicly dedicated right-of-way, of which 25 feet is on the north side of the property line, and 25 feet is on the south side of the property line. We're willing to do either. If they would like the alignment to be half and half, we're okay with that. If we need to push 100% of the right-of-way onto the property to the north, we're willing to do that as well. So I think with the alignment of this particular intersection and the alignment of this roadway, I think we can work with the property owner to the south and come up with the most appropriate alignment of the right-of-way itself, as well as this configuration of this intersection. But I agree with Ryan that the right-in, right-out configuration or access for customers will still be in existence, so people can make that right turn in and right turn out. And then again, just to reiterate that they can access this public street that will be paved in this location at their choice, wherever they want to access that public road. So they're actually also getting a benefit by this public road being in there, eventually a traffic signal here as well. But we do understand they're concerned about truck traffic and radiuses, you know, and there may be a solution where we widen this here and to make sure that it meets all the truck radius requirements so they can make a safe movement. So we're willing to work with them, willing to work with Ryan moving forward before we come back to you with a revised preliminary and a final plat.
Larry, is that something that you could consider, just taking that road in straight back and having a left turn lane to go up into your development instead of having a little jaunt? Is there a way to take that road just straight back?
My understanding is that it would require us to use, you know, much more of their property to make that happen, because otherwise you'd have to come back this way and taper it back in. So I guess we can talk about that. I think from a mixed-use perspective, with the proposed development, we like this entryway in, more of a softer edge coming in, I believe, from, you know, more of an aesthetic point of view, not necessarily a functional, but maybe functional. And Jeff Elliott here can speak to that as well. But I think what will end up happening if we go straight, we're going to end up requiring more of their property, because part of the property, at least with respect to the entrance point on 204th Street, is using their property, because again, remember, with controlled access and this being the only full movement at the 3rd mile, this access point here is fixed. I mean, so we have to design to that particular access point. So a portion of the land will have to be theirs and a portion will have to be ours. Jeff, I don't know if you can talk about, you know, what happens, you know, with respect to the functionality if you go straight. So I'll turn it over to Jeff.
Jeff Elliott, Woodsonia Real Estate, 17007 Marcy Street, Omaha. When we looked at developing the property and the mixed-use use, and we've talked to Mr. Lanahaw, who owns the property here to the east, and we've talked to Michael here on the south. So we see our property generating the most amount of traffic, and so usually you design road systems to funnel the most amount of traffic as easy as possible. Mr. Lanahaw, as it's our understanding, it's going to be single family back here. We don't know what the Rock Place's future will hold. As we've said, it is a 165-acre mixed-use corner, so it could be commercial in nature. But it would seem for us to function better for this to flow into our subdivision with the most traffic coming in here. We did set it up so that this intersection here would work with semi-truck traffic. And if we need to make this radius a little bit wider so they can make this right-hand turn and then turn back into their property, we're happy to do that. The traffic engineer and our engineer designed this movement out so that it would handle semi-truck traffic. It has enough of a turning radius, and this median is placed in a location so that those trucks going out would handle that curve. Even if you did bring this back here, this would be a public right-of-way, and the Rock Place would have to access somewhere onto a public right-of-way. You couldn't take something directly back into their property. It would have to come off with a proper driveway intersection back into their property, if that makes sense.
You'll continue to work with them and come up with a solution?
Yes, we'd be happy to work with them.
Okay. Any other comments or questions from the board? The public hearing was closed. We'll hear from Eric with the City of Omaha.
Okay. I don't think I need to touch on any of the access issues. I believe those have been adequately discussed and what the city's looking for, and we have, common preliminary plat conditions regarding those. It's been mentioned that the intersection of 204th and West Center Road is our largest mixed-use area, up to 165 acres available for office and commercial. Just want to point out the northwest corner of the intersection has accounted for about 15 and a half mixed-use acres. So, subject to an acceptable mixed-use plan, the rezoning from AG to MU would be consistent with the future land use element of the city's master plan. And the department is recommending approval of the rezoning from AG to MU, subject to submittal of an acceptable mixed-use district development agreement prior to forwarding the request to City Council, and then approval of the preliminary plat subject to the following, or the 18 conditions listed in your report with or prior to submittal of a final plat.
Okay. Do we have a motion?
I'll move approval of the rezoning from AG to MU, subject to the submittal of an acceptable mixed-use district development agreement prior to forwarding this request to City Council, and approval of the preliminary plat, subject to the 18 conditions outlined in the recommendation report.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Debbie, will you please record the vote?
Moore,
Yes.
Pate,
Yes.
Morris,
Yes.
Hagan, Olszewski,
He recused himself.
Chair,
Yes.
approved 5-0.
Okay. We're going to move on to agenda item number 10. That is case C11-18-63, C10-18-64, C12-18-65. Applicant Dolman Rowe LLC requests preliminary and final plat approval of Dolman Rowe's a minor plat inside the city limits with a waiver of section 53-84A lot depth, along with rezoning from GC to R7 and approval of a planned unit redevelopment overlay district. Location northeast of 7th and Cedar Streets. May we hear from the applicant, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Brent Beller, 1144 West Center Road, appearing on behalf of the project applicant, Dolman Rose. Again, with me is Benjamin Catt. The development team won't rehash everything that was presented in the TIF application process. But what is before you today is obviously the preliminary and final plat along with the PUD, which are consistent with the redevelopment plan that we presented and that you recommended for approval. So site conditions here, just real quick. This is our site. So it's about just over a 1 acre site. There is one single family residence that's maintaining or going to remain here. Otherwise, this was a former florist. It's now been demolished, and there's some geotech, those sorts of conditions that we're working through. But what's being proposed now is a 30 unit, 15 2-bedroom, 2.5 bath, 2 car garages on the base level, rooftop decks, and then 15 3-bedroom, 3.5 bath units, again, garage parking, rooftop. But this is the plat that's being submitted. In our opinion, this is your quintessential urban infill redevelopment. Utilization of the PUD due to site constraints is obviously the planning vehicle that is being utilized here to deal with some of the size constraints, side setbacks, that sort of thing. Some of the big public improvements that we just wanted to touch on, and again, I don't want to rehash what was brought up in TIF, but Cedar Street, which is the street to the south, this is currently gravel. So in connection with our redevelopment of this entire parcel, repaving Cedar Street, sidewalks, landscaping, lighting, the same is going to be true with respect to sidewalks and landscaping along South 7th, and the same is true with respect to Center Street. Currently, this property is zone GC, so there could be some pretty intense uses that could go on. Currently, based upon the existing zoning, obviously we're not going to do that. We're going to rezone to R7 with the PUD overlay. But with that, I can present just a couple elevations. One of the things that we're subject to with this is obviously the urban design guidelines. So in working with the city, obviously these sorts of materials have to be approved by the urban design team at the city. Based upon the pre-application meetings where we are today, the city has signed off on a lot of these elevations. So again, this is just giving you an overview of what's being proposed here. So with that, don't mean to hurry through it, but I know you heard a lot of it with the TIP application. We're here for any questions. Appreciate the board's consideration.
Okay. Are there any other proponents? Are there any opponents that wish to speak? If you're planning on speaking, you can come down and take a seat right in the front. And then you can take your turn, make sure you give your name and address.
Hi. Jeff Peters, 1901 South 7th Street. My home would be the single-family dwelling that's on the southeast corner of 7th and Center Street. I'm actually a very strong proponent of this redevelopment, except for one. Unfortunately, oh, thank you. Get oriented here.
Jeff, where is your home at? Also,
I have to orient here. Let's see.
give that a turn. There you
There we
go.
go. This is my home.
Okay.
My home, according to my neighbors, my home actually used to be part of that property when it was a florist shop. It was a family florist home. And it was sold out of the family. So my property line is actually the house right here. So this will be my garage here, driveway, and this is my home. The idea of the property developer is to construct the first unit here 5 feet from my property line. My property line is my house. 5 feet is essentially this desk. Currently, I've got views from the kitchen, from the bathroom and the upstairs bedroom of a view that has been helpful now. It previously was a nice florist shop, greenhouses when they were when I first bought the house. I've actually lived in that house half my life now, and you had a good view. Now, essentially, if you build this structure 5 feet from my property line, that's what I'll be looking out at from my bedroom, from my kitchen. When I'm doing the dishes, this is what I will see, is a blank wall, literally arm's distance from my window. I would like to see the first unit here set back ideally 15, 20 feet. It's going to be a 3-story development. I'm going to get zero sunlight, zero airflow as proposed. Having it come back 15, 20 feet, I'd be able to have some view, even if it is a diagonal view. I'd have some sunlight. We'd be able to have a little bit more airflow. That's my only negative about this project. I think it's otherwise a very good project, getting Cedar Street paved, having the rest of the infrastructure done as proposed, and they have changed the design to be more pleasing to the neighborhood. So that's my only objection.
Okay, thank you.
Mary Thompson, 1309 South 6th Street. I am president of the Dolman Neighborhood Association. Our boundaries are Pacific to Martha, 16th to the river. We've been active since the early 70s. Our membership is over 200. We are here today to say that we don't object to development in the neighborhood. Our biggest concern is that there has been absolutely no dialogue within the association or the majority of the members of the resident on this project. We would like to request that this project be held over until we have a meeting with the developer. The only contact I've had was a registered letter informing us of this meeting a little over a week ago. I heard last night that there was a meeting held in regards to this project someplace out in West Omaha, but we were never invited. We feel that we should be better informed of its intent, which affects more than the 7th Street location and in the grand scheme of things, the entire neighborhood. I welcome their participation at our next monthly meeting to give us a little more clarity and more information about their proposed project. And our meeting is at 7 o'clock tonight at the Pellegrini Parish Center at 1248 South 10th Street. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mary. Anyone else?
Yes. I'm Marie Sedlacek. I'm a member of the Dahlman Neighborhood Association. My address is 1015 William Street. I'm here actually on behalf of Arnie Breslow, the Old Market South Neighborhood Association. We kind of work together. So our objection is similar. We're not opposed to development in this area, but we have had a bad track record with developers not coming to our neighborhood associations and speaking to us about projected projects. We'd like to be part of that process. One thing we noticed with this project, this is underutilized land, and we do appreciate somebody building on this project, on this land. One thing that we do notice is a lot of our neighborhood is zoned R7, which allows for really high density development, displacing a lot of single family homes, which is, if you look at, the aerial over here, surrounding this intense development are single family homes. And so this is something, kind of a dialogue we would have had with the developer, would have been, the increased density of this development. So for that reason, we prefer that developers come and talk to our neighborhood associations in addition to the neighbors. And also for that reason, we would appreciate laying over this project until they can come and talk to us. Thank you very much.
Okay. Anyone else? Nope. Okay. I'm going to close the public hearing. Invite the applicant back up if you want to address some of the concerns.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Brent Beller, 1144 West Center Road. To address the neighbor who is sort of remaining in the development, for lack of a better reference, that's right. I mean, his house is on the property line. That's how it was built whenever it was built. The things that this project is subject to, because it's urban infill, we can only construct our site so much. And so we're already restricting the 40-foot width down to 19.5 feet. And we're somewhat constrained by the fact that we have to have these 2 access points in here per the development requirements. So in a perfect world, we'd have another 30 feet down here that we could shift everything to the south to be a little bit more mindful of where this house is built in relation to its property line. But again, we're at 7th and Cedar. It's an urban infill area. We try to work as best as we can. With respect to the meetings, we've had 2 neighborhood meetings, of which we sent out notices to all neighbors within 300 feet. We had a meeting in February, and we had a follow-up meeting in March. Both of those meetings, I was not there, but Mr. Catt was there, were well received. I think Ben took a lot of the input, especially with respect to the design of the row homes, into account. I would say for certain that it appears that the Dahlman Rose Homeowners Association is very active, and it shows because they have a very vibrant neighborhood that a lot of folks want to be into. So I think going forward, obviously Ben and his development team should reach out to them, continue the dialogue, make sure they're going to be good neighbors and representatives of this neighborhood. So with that said, hopefully I addressed most of those questions, but happy to further opine if you need be.
Where were those meetings held?
Those are at 35th and Center. I think that's where Ben has his offices. So it's kind of hard to find an area down here that's open to the public that folks can come. Picking that location was nothing more than that's just where Ben works. And so I would say, and maybe Ben can come down here. I think the first time there was 5 to 10 people there. The second meeting there was about 14 people there. So folks did get the notices. They did show up. And again, from our standpoint, they were well received.
Not telling you how to build your project, just a suggestion. I kind of feel for Jeff here. His house was built and it's right up against the property line, which somebody approved that years ago. Up in your northeast corner, you got a 2-unit building. Is there any possible way of going to a 2-unit building or a 3-unit building behind Jeff?
So that'd be units 10, 11, 10, and 9,
Yeah.
9, 10, 11, 12. Ben, I don't know if you want to come up and talk about the rationale with putting the 4-unit flex right here.
Yeah, so.
Ben, we need your name and address,
Oh,
please.
my name is Ben Catt, and I'm 3501 Center Street. So this site is very, very challenging being an infill site. A lot of this design has to go with the soil. We've been doing a lot of geotech, and there used to be a big ravine here, so we've done a lot of fill, and there's really only so many places we can stick the buildings. That, along with the city liked Center Street being lined, was the other part of that, because it faces the 7th Street, it faces the neighbors, and everything. So that's how we came up with the layout. And then regarding the neighborhood meetings, the first neighborhood meeting was like April 14th or 15th, and there was, February, mid-February, and there's probably around 20 neighbors at the first one. There are a couple issues brought up, design, making it fit within the neighborhood, so we took that feedback, and we kind of did a full redesign on the outside. We talked with the neighbors, and then we invited them all back again March, a week or two ago, and there was again a lot of positive feedback for the new redesign, and neighbors were happy that we were able to make some changes that made it fit better. And how that list was compiled was the 300 feet from our site, and then I basically drew a line, went around it, and then added anybody who was on the border onto that list.
I don't know that you addressed Mr. Rosenbaum's question, though. Is there a way that you can change that design so that you could only put maybe 2 units or 3?
2 or 3.
I don't know if that's going to be doable. There might be a shift of some kind, but overall, the densities we need to hit to make the project feasible is that 30 number. And with the road going through, we have to have, I guess, egress and ingress from the site for the fire trucks and everything else. There's really no room to get a third building up here because of the widths we have with the driveway.
Are we on the same page? I'm talking behind Jeff's house.
Yes, you're talking about moving
there you
12
go.
up to here?
Or,
I'm talking about moving them.
Or just going with a 2 or 3 unit building right there versus a 4-unit building.
Well, I don't know if there's another area where we could squeeze in those missing units. And
you're saying you need all those units in order to make this function.
Correct, because of the soil issues, and then also fully paving Cedar Street. There's a lot of infrastructure costs that this site requires in order to make it feasible.
We gave you a TIF.
Yes.
On this, which would go to offset a lot of that cost.
It's also based on the number of 30 units.
Based on the 30 units?
Right. Based on the 30 units.
What did we give you for a TIF, Red?
It was 1.7.
1.7?
Yep.
Which would change. Can I ask a question?
Yeah, did you want to bring Don up?
Yeah, Don, can you come up, please? We're just obviously talking about a hypothetical here. We approved the 30 units previously. The math would change if it would change to a 29 unit, which would change the TIF as well, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
We need to reevaluate the amount of incremental increase in the value to see if that increment would be enough to support still the TIF. They're at the upper limit right now of what the increment can support.
Right. Yeah.
Is there any other?
Anything for Don?
Oh, no, No, you answered. Were you done with your?
I'm done.
Okay. Were there any other comments or questions?
May I?
Yeah,
I can bring you back up, yeah, sure.
Thank you.
You got to give your name and address again.
Marie Sedlacek, 1015 William Street. Well, I guess my question was procedural. You know, at the beginning, when you simply took up number 4, unlike the previous example with the Holy Spirit Church, shouldn't you have taken up number 4 and number 10 together? Because, I mean, why would you approve a TIF if you really weren't ready, or if there were questions about the plat?
Sure, understood, but yeah, you're comparing 2 different cases with the other that we took together and different procedures, and the TIF, we're just approving a TIF doesn't mean that that is the final or preliminary or final plat. Now we're talking about the preliminary and final plat.
Right, but
for
it
this.
affects the TIF, or whether or not you would even,
Well,
in the
it
end.
might, depending on the board, the decision of the board, so.
Right. Okay, just wanted to bring that up.
Okay,
Thank you
that's
so
all right.
much.
I'm just going to say that I'd hate to be in Jeff's shoes where you end up with a 20-foot building right behind or however the height of these are, but right 5 foot out your back door. And don't know if how long. Don, would you come back up again?
I'd like to also kind of clarify, if I could, for Don Seaton, Omaha City Planning.
Yeah, go ahead, Don.
That approval of a TIF, in our reports, it states very clearly that you still must comply with all city zoning requirements.
Yep.
So the TIF is, you know, if they don't get the zoning figured out, the TIF approval is kind of a moot point.
Yep.
Anyway, I'm sorry.
This is a hypothetical here, and if the board voted that, you know what, we want to see 29 units on this instead of 30, and you had to go back, you would have to go back through the TIF procedures again with the committee and come up with a new number, meet with the applicant, and work everything out, correct?
We may have to.
May have
Depends
to.
on whether that increment would support what they already have been approved for.
Okay.
If it reduces to 29 and the incremental value, the final value of the project is not sufficient to support what had already been approved, then that needs to be, well, if it's final approved by the council, it'd have to be amended. But since it's not a final approval, it'd have to come back to this board. So, yeah. And I'm thinking it's probably likely, I can't guarantee it, but probably likely that if they drop down to 29 or 28 units, they would need to reduce the amount of TIF they're asking for unless they're increasing the sales price of the units.
Yeah, and that's kind of a question I have, if I could bring Mr. Cat up, or maybe you can answer the question with that, because, so I'm looking at your budget here. First of all, what's the per unit price, average per unit price?
Brent Beller, 1144 West Center Road. So for the 2-bedroom, 2.5 bath, I think the market is $270,000 is the proposed sale price. 3-bedroom is probably in the $320,000 range.
How many of each?
15 and 15 of each.
Okay.
So what the part that is going to be troubling for the development team is this is going to skew the entire project. So the meetings and the time that everyone put forward to make sure that this is ready to go, we do that so these sorts of things don't necessarily happen. So, you know, if you negate $300,000 out of a project that is this tight on being feasible, that kind of throws things off. So understand the concerns. You know, if there was a way to redesign it, I think the development team would. But again, with an urban infill development such as this, you try to utilize the site as best you can.
At your meetings, did Jeff come forward at that time and express the concern?
I did.
Jeff, you have to come on up. I'll give your name and
Peters,
address.
1901 South 7th Street. At the very first meeting, I got to look at the plans, and I did see that the space was very close between what looked like my property line and their first building. I did come up to them at that first meeting and asked and clarified that, and then I did some double checking to make sure I knew where my property line was. I had to go to the original property evaluation survey of my home when I bought it 30 years ago, and I did find out that the property line was my wall. At the second meeting, I did bring that up.
Okay. And
they, gave the same explanation because of the property density and et cetera, to make it economically feasible if they were looking at this 30 unit without change.
Okay, thank you, Don. Jeff.
So we're giving him $1.7 million roughly in TIF. You've got $1 million in soft costs built into your budget as well, which, I consider to be architecture, engineering for fees, things like that, but you've got that as a separate line item, so I'm not sure what the $1 million is in there. I still calculate you'd have, depending upon what, if you reduced it to 28 units, 29 units, your construction costs are going to be reduced. You're still got a $2 million profit roughly in the project with that, so why wouldn't it be feasible?
Well, Ben, you'd have to opine. I don't,
Mike,
from a business perspective.
You'd have to call
Yeah,
Ben.
Chip, come on up.
Yep, Ben Cat, 3501 Center. With the project, along with the soft cost, there's further exploration with the soft. The soils is one of the bigger costs. That's changed somewhere. Now we're going to likely have to do deep foundations. So there's just a lot of cost with this project, and I guess that's my answer. I'd have to go back through the numbers, but going through this, it's tight to make it work. TIF makes it work. If that goes and changes and $600,000 is lost to sales, it'll be too tight to. It likely would be too tight to make it work. So these are the numbers we had. I guess I'll let you.
One of the things.
2 units. 1 unit would be 3. But the construction costs.
When we talk about the geotech issues, so as we have went and done further exploration, gone through our due diligence, which is after our TIF application was submitted, the various borings that we've done have uncovered that there's just unstable soil here that we have to compact. That additional cost was not necessarily in our TIF application, and we're not requesting that the city, that be TIF eligible. So that sort of stuff, taking out units, it just causes the whole development to basically go back to the drawing board, reconfigure financials, which just obviously delays everything.
And along with that, construction costs continue to go up, and there's a ravine going through where the deepest borings we're having to go 65 feet down to get something stable. So these are going to need very special. It's not a normal build. It's not a normal lot where you can just go put in a foundation and you do it. There will be either a combination of geopiers and deep foundations, which goes deeper and it does a bell-out with lots of concrete and structural support. So it's a very expensive site to develop. There's a lot of infrastructure that has to go into it, along with a brand new city red.
What are you including in your TIF costs?
In terms of just TIF eligible
Recovery, yeah,
expenses?
what you're recovering from the TIF. Yeah, you're TIF eligible. What would you
Just
calculate
most
into
of
those?
the cost.
Infrastructure, the paving,
Yeah, so all of
streets, the
all of
public
7th
improvements.
Street, all sidewalks going around, all landscaping that's going to be compliant with urban design. There's actually a sewer main that goes through that, that actually dissects the property. That, that's a cost that has to be paid because we've got to connect that sewer from Cedar Street north to Center Street. Again, a cost that when you initially look at the site, you don't notice it, but then when you go and you do your pre-app meeting, it's that sort of stuff that comes up, and you got to account for it.
Okay.
And frankly, this is why I said at the beginning, this is your quintessential urban infill redevelopment. These sorts of issues come up. In a perfect world, there'll be plenty more land in these areas, but there's not. And there's public improvement costs that have to be paid somehow. TIF is a good vehicle to utilize that. The PUD is a good vehicle to take care of a lot of these waivers that traditionally are hard to get. So recognize Jeff's concern about being close. Wish there was a way to work around it necessarily, but it kind of is what it is.
And I agree that, I'm sympathetic with Jeff, and one thing that we've touched on earlier today was, given that this is GC zoning, what could be developed on this property could be a lot worse than what Mr. Catt is proposing. I mean, this fits with the neighborhood and fits with the master plan, and because of the zoning, it could be something a lot different than that doesn't really fit with that neighborhood.
This is Larry's fault.
But I think,
Thank you. Don, were you raising your hand? Did you want to say? Okay.
I think one other comment, and you can come up if you'd like to speak again. But in response to your question about the 5 feet, the 5 feet is not an abnormal. And if you go across all the residential areas of Omaha that are being developed, that's what most of the setbacks are. Now, you might have some higher end lots where you have larger setbacks by nature of the development, but that's the normal approved side lot. It just happens that your house, it's 5 feet inside of that already, just by the way it was laid out way back when. So.
Yeah. That's the only part that's abnormal is where his home says. So.
Jeff Peters, 1901 South 7th Street. I just wanted to reaffirm what they've said about the soil. 4 years ago, I spent $36,000 having my foundation bored down and to bedrock, which was 88 feet down to get my house stabilized, and actually lifted it up 3 inches. So the site is complex, and there's a fairly high water table too. So.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. If you want to come up again, that's all right, Mary. Is it Mary?
Mary
That's what I
Thompson,
thought. Okay.
1309 South 6th. I realized that he said that they notified everybody that lived within 300 feet of this proposed project. But they never take into consideration that just because you don't live within 300 feet, the impact that this project would have on the neighborhood. We have been dealing with developers for quite a few years. We've had one developer in particular, we've had 4 meetings with him already just this year. And he hasn't even started building, he doesn't have plans. So I feel that we really should have been given an opportunity to look at this project before it came up here. And I don't know what I can say, but I feel that we are a recognized neighborhood association. They say that you should contact your neighborhood association. We're listed in the city directory of neighborhood associations. I'm listed as a primary contact. And I feel that because he said only 300 feet are the only people that were interested, I feel that he really kind of just thumbed his nose at us.
Well, that's all he's required to do, Matt. It's okay. We closed the public hearing. Let's hear from the city.
Okay, so there's a couple different cases that we'll get to on motions and votes. I guess just to touch on a few of these items that were discussed. Mr. Rosacker summed it up fairly nicely in regards to Jeff's property and the location of his property line basically being a non-conforming situation. Even if this development was coming in for 3 single-family homes and there was a lot, abutting Jeff's property, let's say you rezone to R4, R5, which is a common low-density residential district. It's true, that side setback would be 5 feet from the new home to that property line. The zoning code doesn't require for you to go above and beyond if the adjacent property is non-conforming. We kind of touched on it last case, with the Rock Place, a non-conforming use, and you definitely want to be cognizant and for the properties that are in place and that have been there, but there are specific zoning regulations that would usually allow a 5-foot setback. So although there are a number of waivers that the PUR overlay would issue, that side setback in that location is not one of them. So I just wanted to point that out. As far as notifications and contacting neighbors, whenever we meet with a potential developer on a case that needs to come to the planning board or city council or zoning board of appeals or other public hearing, we always encourage to reach out to the neighborhood in general, neighborhood associations to the best of their ability. You know, yes, state law requires us to notify property owners within 300 feet. That doesn't mean that you can't go above and beyond. I mean, but we always encourage, you know, and they have done that, you know, whether to the extent that the neighborhood association thinks was fit. You know, I guess I'll leave that up to you. But as far as the first report, the department recommends approval of the rezoning from GC to R7, subject to approval of an acceptable PUR, planned unit redevelopment overlay district plan prior to forwarding to City Council, approval of the waiver of section 53-84A for lot depth, approval of the preliminary plat subject to the 6 conditions listed in the recommendation report, and approval of the final plat subject to the conditions of preliminary plat approval and submittal of an acceptable final subdivision agreement prior to forwarding the request to City Council for final action.
Do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion for the approval of rezoning from GC to R7, subject to approval of acceptable PUR planned unit redevelopment overlay district prior to forwarding to the council. Approval of waiver of sections 4A for lot depth. Approval of the preliminary plat subject to the 6 conditions in the report, and the approval of the final plat subject to the conditions of the preliminary plat approval and submittal of an acceptable final subdivision agreement prior to forwarding to the request to City Council for final action.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Debbie, we have a motion and a second. Will you please call the vote?
Morris,
Yes.
Haggett,
Yes.
Rosacker,
Yes.
Moore,
Yes.
Tate,
Yes.
Mr. Chair.
Yes. Okay, do we have a motion on the PUR?
Sure, and I guess I could have mentioned this before, but I do want to
I'm sorry.
point out that all of these items will need to go to City Council for final approval. Oftentimes, it does take some time for the subdivision agreements, PUR plans to be finalized and for it to be placed on City Council. And we definitely would encourage the applicant continue those conversations with neighbors. So there is time for that, and there is also another public hearing at City Council. So I just wanted to mention that. Regarding the PUR overlay district, the department recommends approval of the PUR overlay district subject to submittal of acceptable final PUR plans prior to forwarding this request to City Council.
Do we have a motion?
A motion for approval of the PUR planned unit redevelopment overlay district subject to submittal of acceptable final PUR plans prior to forwarding this request to the City Council.
We have a motion and a second. Debbie, will you please record the vote?
Morris,
Yes.
Haggett,
Yes.
Rosacker,
Yes.
Moore,
Yes.
Yes.
Mr. Chair.
Yes. Okay, we're going to move on to agenda item number 13. I'll give them. Don't know. Okay, we're moving on to agenda item number 13, case C7-18-69, C8-18-70. Applicant, New Singular Wireless. Request approval of a major amendment to a conditional use permit to allow secondary educational facilities in a R3 district and approval of a special use permit to allow a broadcasting tower in a R3 district with the waiver of section 55-1 166, height to allow a 92-foot tall tower. Location 400 North Happy Hollow Boulevard. Is the applicant present? Okay, didn't think so. Are there any proponents? Are there any opponents? If you wish to speak, you can come take a seat up front and give your name and address, please.
My name is Peter Manhart, 312 South 57th Street. I am the president of the Dundee Memorial Park Association, and we learned about this proposal a few weeks ago, and we had the applicants to our board meeting on Monday evening, and they gave a pretty detailed description. We did have the applicant's proposal, so we knew a good deal about it. They did give the board, the whole board was there. We had all, I believe, 17 members of the board were present for this, and they talked to us a little bit about, a lot about the program and gave us plenty of details. We all obviously live in the neighborhood, many of which, many on the board are past presidents. There'll be another past president to speak today. And we all made it very clear that we oppose this proposal. The three reasons we oppose it are, one, most importantly, is the location. It's about 52 feet from the property line of the most iconic park in the city, and that isn't arguable, Memorial Park. And it is 92 feet high. It will be disguised as a tree, and I don't know if you know many 92 feet high trees that are roughly 4 feet 4 feet wide. So we believe it will definitely stick out and be an eyesore. The War Memorial, it will be in the backdrop of the War Memorial, and we find it, that 92 feet will dwarf everything around it. Most trees are maybe 50 feet. In this location specifically, they're more like 30 to 35 feet to 40 feet. This will be more than twice that height, and it will be green year-round, and it will be the backdrop for the War Memorial. And to a lot of the neighbors, I've had an inordinate amount of calls in the last few days, as you can imagine, most of which have no problem with their cell service at all. They do not use AT&T. And if you do not use AT&T, all of you probably have no problem with your cell service. You can see that by simply looking at a coverage map. It's on your phone. It'll tell you just exactly the coverage in this specific area is absolutely no problem with several different carriers that are not named AT&T. And for those that have called me, and for those online, only online, I've not heard from anyone directly that are for this proposal. I have seen online where people say I got crummy service, so and I always suggest that they maybe talk with another provider. But we don't. The aesthetics of, obviously the height is 92 feet, the aesthetics and the location of this are our biggest. It's not an improvement at all. Many times, many of these people that spoke today said, we welcome this improvement to our neighborhood. This is the exact opposite of what you've heard all day long, and this is not an improvement to the area. So if you have any questions for me, I'll be here. That's about it.
Okay, thank you. Any other opponents?
Hi, I'm Matt Johnson, 123 North Happy Hollow Boulevard. And as Peter mentioned, I'm a past president of the Neighborhood Association. I've already submitted some written testimony on this subject, and I won't duplicate that here. I just wanted to support what Peter said and to emphasize in a way that I'm sure the applicant cannot or will not, in the way that Peter couldn't, the aesthetic blight this would place on our neighborhood. The proposal is for a 92-foot cell tower. It's disguised as a tree. The applicant included with his proposal some photo mock-ups, two-dimensional photo mock-ups of a fake tree. AT&T may live in a two-dimensional world. We live in a three-dimensional world. I encourage all the planning board members to go out and visually inspect the site, locate where AT&T proposes to build this tree, and imagine a 92-foot cell tower disguised as a tree there. It would not just stick out. It would be a real eyesore. When we met with AT&T on Monday night, we asked them if there were other examples of fake trees in the metropolitan area. AT&T could not cite one to us. AT&T obviously didn't show any real live examples of fake trees to the people at Brownell who preliminarily agreed to go forward with this proposal. The only one I'm aware of is at 95th and Pacific Street. If you go to 95th and Pacific Street, abutting a church parking lot there, is a fake evergreen tree. The fake evergreen tree is about 45, maybe 50 foot tall. It's screened on three sides by real trees. It's not in a prominent parked area. It's not in a walking neighborhood like our neighborhood is. It's much shorter, and it still sticks out like a sore thumb. So go out, look at the tree at 95th and Pacific Street, double it in size, and imagine it in place in front of one of our most prominent parks. So I would encourage the planning board to do whatever it can to encourage AT&T and Brownell to abandon the fake tree proposal for disguising a cell tower. I'm not sure that anybody in the neighborhood has objections to a cell tower properly camouflaged per se, but it's hard to imagine any 92-foot tower, however camouflaged, that would blend in with that entrance to the park. So I'm glad to see that the planning and parks departments have also expressed serious reservations about this proposal, and well, I think people in the neighborhood are willing to consider other proposals that are more thoughtfully presented and blended in with the neighborhood. I don't think that it's the neighborhood's job to do that. I think AT&T and Brownell, if it wants to continue with this proposal, has to come through with a better proposal. Thank you.
My name is James McGee. I live at 5225 Jackson Street. I echo the same sentiments of my neighbors and have to point out 950 Douglas County men and women that died in World War II have their name etched on that memorial that's just 100 yards from where they want to put up this outrageous tree. I'm fairly disappointed. It could be made discreet. It could be put in a bell tower, a clock tower, a number of approaches that really wouldn't be as outrageous and disrespectful to the war dead. Brownell Talbot had the gall to describe this phony tree as a discreet tower, 92 feet, 50 feet above the closest thing near it. It will be in every picture of Memorial Park for the next 50 years, one of the iconic images in the city. It sits right on the skyline. I've been involved with emergency alerts in Nebraska for 25 years. I was involved with the first deployment of wireless alerts for highway information, for Amber Alerts, for missing adults. And my advice would be to anybody that has a cell phone problem that AT&T is describing simply to get another carrier. We don't have these single tower donut holes like AT&T is pretending. The other side of this coin is that UNO took down a 500-foot tower. If there's any coverage hole at the UNO campus, it's because of the activities of the university. So therefore, I simply ask you, this is an outrageous departure from current zoning that the rest of us have had to live with. The applicant does give their address as 400 North Happy Hollow, which is probably technically accurate. However, the location of this tower is 56th and Western. It's not in the ravine, it's not discreet, it's on the highest part in the neighborhood. And I really implore you, as city officials, to respect the 950 people whose names are etched on that memorial, and to just do not approve this waiver. It's an insult to the dead, and it's not copacetic or it doesn't fit into the neighborhood at all. So thank you for your time. Thank you for your service as board members as well.
Thank you, James. Are there any other opponents? Okay, I'm going to close the public hearing. The applicant is not here. Any comments or questions from the board? Okay, can we hear from the city? Eric?
So the city has some of the similar concerns that were expressed by a few of those who just spoke. The location of the tower, the height of the tower. We believe that we need to have further conversations with the applicant regarding the proposed facility, and we are recommending layover.
Okay, do we have a motion?
Move to layover.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Debbie, will you please record the vote?
Mangan?
Yes.
Rosacker?
Yes.
Moore?
Yes.
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 Bear?
Yes. Okay. We'll move on to agenda item, was 15 taken off?
Yes.
It's still on, it was on the consent agenda. Oh, it's to be heard. Okay, that's what I thought. I kind of scribbled through my notes here, and we're going to go to agenda item number 15, case C7-88-220, applicant Omaha Performing Arts Society. Request approval of a major amendment to a conditional use permit to allow surface parking in a CBD. Property is located within an ACI 1 overlay district. Location 1512 Howard Street and 424 South 15th Street. May we hear from the applicant, please?
Hi, Troy Meyerson, 409 South 17th Street. Mr. Chair, members of the board, I'm here on behalf of the applicant, which is Omaha Performing Arts. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak on this matter. I know that it was put on the consent agenda, and we asked to be heard because of the timing constraints that the Orpheum Theater has on trying to get this improvement completed, and the fact that I think that the reservations of the city can be accommodated adequately through the ordinary course. So I put on here just the drawing or the site plan. I think that you all probably saw this earlier today, but just to orient what the project is. Currently, the parking lot that's generally shown here is in existence. It's in maybe questionable shape right now, or at least could use some freshening up, which is what the Omaha Performing Arts is trying to do this summer. In addition, this where these are shown, currently there's a building that the Performing Arts will be taking down in short order as part of this project, and expanding the parking lot and adding 10 parking stalls. The other piece of this that will be happening this summer that we're in coordination with the city is to improve the asphalt in the alleyway that connects 16th Street to this parking lot and goes behind the parking garage that's right here. So that's not part of what's before you today, but that's part of the total improvement project that we're trying to complete this summer. So the three concerns that the city has raised and that we believe we have either already worked through and or are in the process of working through and can be handled without a layover today are as follows. The first one that the city raised is to provide for a newly constructed screen wall. The screen wall, there is a non-compliant screen wall that runs along Howard and then along 15th Street. It's dilapidated, needs to be improved, and it also needs to be brought up to code. That is part of what our request is, that we also are trying to be in front of the ZBA on the 14th. So the zoning board of appeals hopefully would hear and approve our requests for waivers with regard to a green parking lot, those code requirements, and part of that.
When you say 14th, what, May 14th or April 14th?
April 14th. Is that right, or is it the 12th? I'm sorry, it's the 12th. Take that back. Yeah, April 12th. So this wall is it has to comply with this section 55-928E. We understand that and are absolutely in agreement that we will submit plans that are compliant, and we've already had discussions with the city. The city actually sent us a representative wall that they think might be good for us to at least look at, maybe implement for our wall here. But absolutely, our wall would need to comply with city code, which when we submit that plan, that is sort of the ability for the city to comment. The second issue that was raised is that the original tree planters that were in our site plan that we submitted were not compliant with I think there's some sort of an updated, revised street planter. So we resubmitted a plan on, was that Monday or Tuesday? Okay, so we resubmitted a plan on Monday after we got that. So that's with the city. Absolutely, we will put in the planters that are compliant with the city code. And so that, in our mind, is already accomplished. And then lastly is this issue that was raised by the city with regard to when we, I'm going to move this real quick and put this right back up. So when we take down this building, it will expose the east side of the parking garage that's directly to the west of the building. I'm told, and I believe it to be true, that wall was not designed to be viewed because it was going to be right behind a wall. So some of the aesthetics that are on the south and the west side of that parking garage are not on that east side. So the request by the city was that Omaha Performing Arts do something that would be more some sort of a screening. What had been suggested, as you'll see, is at a minimum, a 10-foot high vegetative screen wall, which the city proposed or sent a picture of a representative vegetative screen wall that sort of for us to understand what that means, because I was not familiar with a vegetative screen wall before that. And then in their comments, they made it clear that they're not. This one happens to be attached to the garage. We don't own the garage. We would be willing to have conversations if the garage owner would allow us to do something like that. we would be willing to attach it. Otherwise, we could do some sort of a freestanding vegetative wall. In another recent conversation with the city, another suggestion which I think is intriguing was made that in lieu of a vegetative screen wall, maybe some sort of a mutually agreeable thematic screening, something that would pull in something that deals with the arts, which we would be open to having that conversation with the city. Absolutely. And at a minimum, we would commit to, if we were unable to do that, if we were unable to come to a mutually agreeable thematic screening, then, at a minimum, a 10-foot high vegetative self-standing screen. So I put on here this construction window because I wanted to make sure that everybody knows what the Orpheum is and the Omaha Performing Arts is trying to accomplish. From June 26th until August 4th, the Orpheum will be closed for some interior capital improvements. And that's the timing that we're trying to also coordinate these exterior improvements. Next year will be the biggest season for the Orpheum ever. It includes among a whole host of really terrific performances, Hamilton, and so we're really trying to get as much of this accomplished as we can, and we absolutely want to and will comply with the Omaha requirements, and I think that there are, without laying us over, we can still accomplish all three of these concerns. We're willing to agree to them as conditions of the approval for the conditional use permit. We're willing to agree to work cooperatively with the city to accomplish those three items as a condition to receive the building permit that we would otherwise need. So I do think that there are some checks that the city would otherwise have without laying us over at this meeting. So I'm sure you guys want me to talk for another 15 to 20 minutes, but I will sit down and let you guys. Troy Meyerson, 409 South 17th. So thank you very much for your consideration. It's really an exciting project, and it's going to be a really exciting season. And I'm here for any questions that you might have.
Okay, thank you. Any other?
Troy, can I ask a question now? Or?
Sure, go ahead.
Hey, when did you get the requirements, those three requirements, back from the city? How long have you had those?
So we met with the city on March 8th.
Okay.
We received these three items, I think, on the 1st.
Okay.
Well, Monday of this week. We received the report that we were suggested to be laid over on Friday, and then we received these items on Monday. Is that Monday morning?
Okay.
So we're really trying to accommodate anything and everything that the city has asked of us. We're just on this tight time.
Sure. So who owns the garage?
Well, the garage is owned by a Mr. Webster. I don't know.
And have you had any discussions with him so far about the screening possibilities, or no talking with him at all?
So we just heard about being asked about the screening, the vegetative screening on Monday. The thematic option was brought up today. So we have not, if it's approved, we already have scheduled to reach out to him tomorrow. We have a relationship. We've been neighbors for a long time. So it's not like, and in fact, at one point, when the 300 feet notice went out, I know that actually the management company that manages that for him reached out to Omaha Performing Arts, and they just explained taking the building down, putting in some new parking. At the time, we didn't know that there was any interrelationship with the garage or not, but there is an active dialogue between neighbors. Yeah.
Get a permit to take that building down, do a lot of work. Regardless, there's a schedule and a time that takes to site preparation and stuff that you can do without our approval, can he? Demolition of the building, that takes some time.
So I agree with you, and we're going to continue to do as much as we can without having approval. But the and my 14th number was because of the May. It's May 4th is your next meeting. May 14th is the next ZBA meeting. So that, and then we have to get building permits in to the city to get approved, which, you know, can take reasonably 3 to 4 weeks, I think.
You could also do the building permit. There's nothing holding that.
Well, if we don't have a,
it could still be issued subject to.
Just a quick clarification, if a building permit was submitted, our zoning division would put it on hold, but it could continue through the review process of other departments or who needs to look at it.
Since there's been an application in force, in process.
Okay. And that, I mean, if any changes were required by the ZBA on the 14th and we've already submitted plans, I just, it's a really narrow window that I completely understand. We're just trying to make sure that we can complete this whole project. You know, we still have to get contractors to bid a project, all those kinds of things. So is it feasible? It probably can be done. We're worried that it's at risk of not being fully completed, and we really have no flexibility on our window.
I guess I'm just curious why it wasn't submitted, you know, earlier, like last month.
Well, we met March 8th.
Well, but why?
And then
I mean, this probably was known in February, right?
What took you so long to submit it?
Well, I mean, I know that we started working on it earlier. I don't think that I know that it took several weeks to get a meeting with the city. That I'm not blaming the city. I'm just saying sometimes some of these.
That's the way it is. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I am not. The city's been great to work with. I'm not saying anything bad about the city, and I understand. I really wish that I was standing here in January instead of today. And I'm not saying that we don't have some culpability. I'm not. But I'm also saying that I think we can absolutely accomplish all three of these items without a layover. And so I think everybody wins, because I promise you that we're going to get everything accomplished that's described here. One of them's already done. Another one is required by code, so we're going to comply with that code. So, and then lastly, this one, this does not have to be completed as part of so that vegetative screen would not have to be, that improvement would not have to be completed. So I actually think that Omaha Performing Arts is very intrigued by a thematic option. So that piece, we would work collaboratively with the city to see what that looks like and what that means. That likely wouldn't be done. Wouldn't be done by the time that we would be submitting for a building permit, because it doesn't need to be done at that time. We would make a full commitment if that didn't pan out to do this 10-foot self-standing vegetative wall. So anyway, what else? What other questions can I answer?
We talked quite a bit about this in our pre-meeting upstairs. I've been on the board for 7 or 8 years, and one thing I've noticed about the city planning department is they're consistent. Sometimes there's a perception out there that maybe they're not, but that's the wrong perception. They're consistent. And there's got to be procedures that are followed, and if we don't follow those procedures, then we have other developers, other engineers, other people coming forward and saying, hey, I need to push my project through. needs to be done. We're under a deadline. And the point that Dave Rosacker was making, it's too bad that you weren't here in January or February doing this, and all the boxes would have been checked, the procedure would have gone through, and it would have gone through easily probably for you. But now you're asking us to, like the wall there, to screen the parking garage. You're asking us to okay something that we haven't seen for certain, haven't seen plans on, don't know exactly what's going to happen. Other things, we don't know exactly what's going to happen. And so that's my concern, is that we're breaking precedent here and trying for your schedule to move forward, which is going to come back around where everybody else is going to want to know, why can't we move forward quickly rather than going through the proper procedure?
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I think that, this would be an exception instead of the rule. And I, for one, don't have a problem pushing this through, given what it is, what the project is, and it's a known entity. This isn't like something that has a lot of moving pieces to it. So I'm okay with, given everything that we've talked about and knowing Troy, I'm not worried about it. And I think it'll get done. And so I think we should ask the city for their.
I think Troy is going to do what is required, and it'll probably be a nice project. It just goes against the procedure, and how do we tell a developer, an engineer, whoever that comes at the last, not that you came at the last minute, but we're pushed, hey, go ahead and approve ours. This is, you did that for the performing arts. So now we need ours done.
Every real estate contract says something about if one of the paragraphs doesn't conform to the law or whatever like that, that doesn't mean that the contract, I don't know if that fits or not, but.
I don't know if it fits either.
But I don't know, but I know that it's, we beat the hell out of this thing, so I'd like to hear from the city.
Well, we're not done yet with, if there's any other proponents that want to talk or any opponents, so.
Well, I'm still I'm somewhat confused on the time frame here. When is the zoning board of appeals meeting?
So, I guess just to touch on the process a little bit, your recommendation report was finalized Thursday of last week. And in it, there's some statements or language. There are times when, if the city is not supportive of waivers within an ACI overlay district, there are times that it has to go to the Urban Design Review Board. Okay? So during the finalization of our report, that status was still up in the air whether this case had to go to the Urban Design Review Board. And so with that being said, there was an application to be placed on the Zoning Board of Appeals. However, in light of our layover recommendation and that unclear status whether it had to go to Urban Design Review Board, we took that off the Zoning Board of Appeals agenda. So this case will not be heard at next week's ZBA. The notification has already been finalized, I believe, yesterday, and this case is not on it. So that was in our email to you guys on Friday. So just to point that out. Coming back, I recommended on Friday afternoon to the applicant that they reach out to our urban design division to further this discussion along, because Monday was the deadline to be placed on Urban Design Review Board if it needed to go to that board. In the past couple days, Monday and Tuesday, when all these conversations were taking place about these items, it was determined that it would not go to the Urban Design Review Board, or would not need to go to the Urban Design Review Board. So therefore, the process is Planning Board, and then any waivers, which there are a couple waivers that are needed with staff support, would have to go to the Zoning Board of Appeals. So whether this is laid over or approved today, the next possible Zoning Board of Appeals meeting would be on May, I believe May 10th. May 10th. So that's kind of process where we're at.
So just so I understand, even if we approve this today, the applicant can't do anything with this until May 14th, is that correct?
Well, May 10th would be
Or
the
May
next
10th, I'm
ZBA
sorry.
meeting. Well, there are certain items that were discussed. I
Demolition.
mean, you can get demolition permit. You can submit for building, permits to get that in review. Zoning would not be able to sign off. But other departments, there's several different departments that review building permits. But yes, there is the possibility that, the Zoning Board of Appeals meeting, there could be changes as a result of that separate board. But a wreckage permit, other site work that doesn't include the expansion, the parking, and then submittal of building permits, those could be done now.
And are you guys planning on doing all of that before the June 26th, or what does your construction timeline look like? What is actually happening within that window?
Starting on the 26th,
Yeah.
That's our window to do all of our construction, whatever construction.
Is that when you're
we're-
okay.
Now, just my understanding is that the demolition of the building is not tied to the conditional use permit. Is that not correct?
Turn my mic. Dave Fanslet, Planning Director. I don't understand your question, Troy.
I mean, if Omaha Performing Arts is able to get a contractor to, I mean, obviously you got to get a demolition permit.
Sure.
But that taking down the building would not be tied to amending the existing conditional use permit, just the paving of it and creating a parking stalls out of it.
You could apply for a demo permit without approval of the conditional use permit. Yes. Is that what you meant?
Could we get one, or just apply for one?
Yes, you could.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure that.
We've been doing this a long time, so yes, you could.
Okay. Eric is correct that his email on Friday did say that he had pulled us from the ZBA. I did not realize that, and I know that he recommended layover. I thought that since we had applied timely for the ZBA, if we were approved here, we could still make it to the ZBA.
Just unfortunately with the timing of that final notification for Zoning Board of Appeals, there's no avenue for us to be able to put it on for next week's meeting. So that
Okay.
is.
I did not realize that.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Troy? Are there any other proponents that wish to speak? Any opponents? I'll close the public hearing. Any further comments or questions? We'll hear from the city. Eric?
Okay, I don't think I have anything more that I need to add. Well, I guess I just want to touch a little bit on, it puts us, we're trying to be as accommodating to all developments that we can be. There's a tight turnaround on planning board, zoning board, all of our boards when we get the packet out and when we've done our review and, also working on other responsibilities that we have, as a staff. And we try to be as accommodating as possible. It puts us in a difficult spot though when, things are changing and, just the couple days leading up to the request. And so for that reason, that is why we are, sticking with the layover recommendation. Yes, the applicant has been working with certain city staff members on possible solutions and moving forward. But with that being said, we are recommending layover. If the planning board makes the decision that they want to move forward, I would like the opportunity to suggest a few conditions if that's the way that you were going to go.
What would those be, please?
I think we would need a couple general conditions. Let me get my train of thought here before I speak.
I think it's unfair to ask you to know what those are right now, to be quite honest with you, because we don't want you to miss anything.
And that's correct, and that's always the problem when we're.
But then we need those if someone wants to make a proposal to approve.
But that's what we're up against. We don't, there's the rub. We don't have the adequate time for Eric and the planning department to address this issue.
Well, and it wouldn't have to be my words, but it would be something subject to submittal of an acceptable site or an acceptable site and landscape plan acceptable to city staff. And then the second one would probably be receiving any necessary waivers from the Zoning Board of Appeals that are acceptable to city staff.
I'd like to say something if I could. Dave Fanslaw, Planning Director. Again, regardless of if you all approve it today, it still has to go to the ZBA in May. So going back to what Greg said and what we talked about at our pre-meeting is we have 16 cases on our agenda for today, which is, a little light. But if we had even a handful, but you can see how much we're struggling with one case after the reports are out and probably not major issues, but something that we wanted to look at. And I've told this board for a number of years that we want to allow you to see what you're approving. So you see how much time we've spent on this one case. Can you imagine if 2 or 3 or half a dozen came in after we did our report, after staff worked for 2.5 weeks to put reports together? We can't get in the business of entertaining too many requests or any request really after our reports are out that require this much detail, because for a number of reasons we couldn't handle it if we had too many of them. So setting a precedent by doing this kind of business after reports are done is a little bit of a slippery slope. But Sherry talked about it at pre-meeting and Eric talked about it again. It's not like the current planning staff is now waiting for a week for the next deadline. We spent all day today, 3.5 hours on 16 cases. Once reports are done, Thursday prior to the meeting, staff shifts and they're doing building permit review and they're answering other emails. So there's not time most of the time for staff to start reviewing projects and amending recommendation reports most of the time. I just wanted to add that. Thanks.
I respect that, and I'll make a motion to lay over.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Debbie, will you please record the vote?
Dave?
Dave did.
Yes.
She wants your vote.
Said yes.
He said yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Mr. Chair.
Yes. Okay.
Thank you.
Final agenda item number 16, case C7-18-73, applicant City of Omaha, request approval of a conditional use permit to allow safety services in a CC district, location 20924 Cumberland Drive. May we hear from the applicant, please?
All right. Good afternoon, almost evening. Last but certainly not least, I'm Katie Underwood with Olson Associates, civil engineer on the project, 2111 South 67th Street, Omaha, Nebraska. We're here today to ask for approval of safety services within a community commercial zoning district. I'll give a brief overview of the operation and the site layout, and then would be happy to take questions. With me today are Mark Chalkley, project manager, the architect from Leo Daly, as well as Mike Eastman, the project manager from Public Works. So since this is a public project, we have been before the Urban Design Review Board. We did that last month and were approved related to the building design schemes and materials and site layout. And then we're continuing to work with the planning department on specific code requirements. The West Precinct will house uniform patrol officers, the traffic division, and the emergency response unit division for the police force. The building will house both internal operations for the police department, and then there will also be a community space and publicly accessible space right at the front of the building. I'm showing the front elevation here that was submitted to the Urban Design Review Board. So the idea is to make the front sort of a publicly accessible, welcoming space. There's glass, a lot of glass shown, as well as landscaping and a plaza space, and then a parking field in front. The facility will operate 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and will employ 22 patrol staff per shift for 3 shifts. It will also house 3 full-time emergency response unit employees, 30 SWAT employees, and 25 traffic officers. And I'll show the site plan here. So this is along Cumberland Drive. The north is facing left on your screen. So the mark is located to the east, and then there are some smaller sort of industrial flex office buildings to the west. There are 2 shared access drives that exist here and here that straddle the property lines, and so this facility will utilize those access points. This is the front publicly accessible parking space with the plaza, and then the rear lot will be gated, and that's where the officers will access that lot back there with a secured entrance. And there will be fencing on all sides around that, on the northeast and west sides. So activities to date, Urban Design Review Board approval, like I mentioned earlier. There was a neighborhood meeting that took place last month. Addresses within a 300-foot radius were provided by the planning department, and so that's who the letters were sent to for the neighborhood meeting. And there was a separate meeting with the farmhouse owner to the northwest, and a separate meeting with the Mark ownership group to the east as well. In general, the neighbors are pleased with the design of the building, and pleased with the operation. There are a couple of things that we'll continue to work out with them. One of those items being the fence materials, but I'm confident that we'll get there. It won't be a problem. And that pretty much sums everything up. We would be happy to take any questions that you guys have.
It looks like from your plan, the existing tree canopy, that all stays on the west side and the north side.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, and we'll actually add some additional trees over there too to meet the buffer yard requirements.
Okay.
So what will be the staffing approximately in this location, because there's a lot of parking?
Yeah, let's see if I can add them all up. So we'll have about 55, and correct me if I'm wrong, 55 to 60 staff at one time. Okay, 60 or 70 staff at once.
Will the majority of that be uniform then, or just mechanics and everything else? I assume that's part of it.
Yeah, so about 22 patrol staff per shift for 3 shifts. You'll have 3 full-time emergency response unit employees, 30 SWAT employees total. I don't think those guys will be there all at one time. And then 25 traffic officers, and then additional administrative support.
I'm just curious, at the north end of that lot, there's these, I know, I see where the cars are parked, but there's these other little things. What are those?
I'm sorry.
They look like little parking lots, but they got dots in them. I don't know what it is. Is that a storage?
On the left end there.
Here?
Along the, just to your left there, just a little bit more. Right?
I think they're just their tree canopy just showed up in there maybe.
Oh, this?
Yeah, yeah.
This, yeah, so that is, those are parking stalls that may or may not be included depending on how things come in with the construction budget. It's the we're including it as an ad alternate. That's why it's sort of shaded in there.
Yeah, they look shallower than the others, but that's okay. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Your fencing material, you said you're still working on that. Are you down to just a couple different decisions, or you're looking at a cyclone fence, a wrought iron fence?
Yeah, we're looking at a few different options. It on the east side, it needs to be opaque to screen it from the mark, and so we haven't determined what exactly that material will be.
Okay.
But want it to be nice looking, to complement the building and be acceptable to the neighbors, but also do the job with sort of shielding the view.
Okay. Any other questions?
Perfect.
Any other proponents that wish to speak? Come on down, sir.
Hi, my name is Todd Engel at 14747 California Street. I am part owner of Kingpin Properties, which owns the Mark, and I'm the owner rep for the Mark. I just wanted to say that we're very strong proponents of this project. One of my business partners in the Mark also owns the 2 buildings to the west. That's Willie Douglas and Mike Shetkoski. They're also proponents of the project. We only had 2 issues, and I think those have been mentioned, and that was just the quality of the fencing to make sure it's aesthetically pleasing, because you know the setback to the Mark is much further back on the lot than this building. There's a lot of garage doors on that east side, and so our customers will see a lot of that, a lot of the building there. So we've got a commitment from this group that we don't have any concerns about coming to an agreement on a fence. And the only other issue was just ingress and egress on both sides. We actually have access to the west side of our property, the east side of this property, through an easement on this property. That's where a lot of the youth sports activities that we have going on. We've got 3 basketball courts and 5 volleyball courts. That's the typical access point for that. And you've got your emergency vehicles exiting at that same point. So we thought it prudent just to maybe plan for a widened drive there. So that's, I think that's on this second drawing that may not have been on the first submittal. And then I think
I think Willie's been fine with the ingress egress on the west side, based on our meetings. That's all I've got. Questions?
Thank you.
Thank you. Any opponents that wish to speak? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Any comments or questions from the board? Here we hear from the city.
Sure. So as Katie mentioned, with this being a publicly funded public facility, although this area is not, an urban design corridor on Cumberland Drive, for city projects, we try to, have the design to the highest level that we have, and that's the reasoning for the Urban Design Review Board. There's been a lot of conversations with planning staff and all department staff on the development of this precinct. It's compliant with the master plan. We're recommending approval of the conditional use permit to allow safety services in a CC district subject to the 7 conditions being addressed with or prior to issuance of a building permit.
I'll recommend approval of the major amendment to a conditional use permit to allow surface parking on a CBD property is located within an ACI 1 overlay district.
16.
Oh, I read the wrong one, sorry.
Yeah.
Approval of the conditional use permit to allow safety services in the CC district.
You've got
Subject to this.
subject to the,
Yeah, subject to the conditions in the department report.
okay. We have a motion and a second. Debbie, will you record the vote, please?
Yes. Yes.
Morris,
Yes.
Megan,
Yes.
Rosacker,
Yes.
Terry.
Before I vote, I just want to say thank you to the city for bringing a police precinct out to
Me too.
good old Elkhorn. Yeah, Dave and I were out there when we were the city of Elkhorn, and police coverage we had at that point. Excited to have a police precinct out there. I vote yes.
Yes, thank you. Okay, next.
Okay, that completes our agenda.
Minutes?
Minutes from last month. Do we have a motion on the minutes?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Debbie? Yes. Oh, who, Dave and Mike.
We vote?
Not yet. Not yet. She's getting-
Okay, sorry.
That's all right, do it.
Okay. Casey,
Yes.
Morris,
Yes.
Megan.
Yes.
Rosacker.
Yes.
Moore,
Yes.
Mr. Chair.
Yes. Do we have a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
Trenton and Dave.
Nate,
Yes.
Morris,
Yes.
Megan,
Yes.
Rosacker,
Yes.
Moore, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
We gotta give her a microphone. Find me if you can't hear her.
Can't hear.